It's Monday, September 13th, 2021. And we're all here. I'm here with my colleagues, Mike Betancourt, Mariano Goluboff, Rich Mucci, and I'm here myself. So,
And I will call the Monday, September 13th, 2021 Planning Board meeting to order. And we're going to do a roll call vote just to be odd. So Cheryl Wolf.
Right here.
Sally Dale.
Here.
Ching Scott.
Here.
And Diab Jerry is here, all present. Thank you.
So we're here to make a joint appointment to the planning board. There's a vacant seat on the planning board, and I believe the candidate who's applying is here on the Zoom, Kurt Spring. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for volunteering to serve the town.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here tonight, at least.
Thanks so much. My name is Brian Zakelli. I'm the town planner. I have a couple of questions for you related to the position. We're really excited that you're here. We've all read your cover letter or your interest letter and reviewed your resume. And it's going to be 3 short questions. After each question, you'll respond, and then there will be, if there's any follow-up questions from any of the 9 members of the board, they will ask at that time. So kind of an easy one, but and you did actually speak of this in the letter, but for the sake of the camera here, why are you interested in this position on the planning board?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, one, I'm a resident here and have been since 2013, and so I've sort of been thinking about different ways or trying to seek out different ways where I could be helpful and contribute some time to the community to try and just do my part to some extent. And I think just given my background, I have a bachelor's degree, like a double major in economics, and then it was called the Growth and Structure of Cities. It was really like an urban studies, urban planning undergrad degree. And then I got an MBA at Boston College. And so I just always been really interested in like urban planning, urban studies, design, development, real estate. I have a job. I work in commercial real estate now. So I would say it's both, a professional, interest for me, but also a personal interest. I'm really interested in planning and development, period. And then I think on top of that, I have a vested interest in sort of how Winchester grows and develops and expands. And I'd love to be a part of making sure it happens in a really, thoughtful way.
It's great. Anyone from either the planning board, the select board, have a follow-up? You can physically raise your hand or do whatever makes sense. But if not, I thought that was, yep, Diab, the chair of the planning board.
Hi, good evening. So I have 2 questions. One really quick question. How long have you been in Winchester? And the second question is, what sort of scale of commercial development are you involved with?
Sure. So the first question, maybe the easier, simpler one, July 2013 is when my family, when we moved to Winchester. And then the second question, yeah, from a professional standpoint, I work at a private equity firm based in Cambridge. And so we are kind of a middle market opportunity fund. We have a little over like 1.4 billion in equity under management. These are just all big stats. But I mean, to really get down to the nitty gritty of your question, we're mostly investing in like multifamily, industrial, lots of different asset classes, very little here locally in Massachusetts. We actually invest more so in like the Southeast, in Texas and various growth markets. So, I mean, we're investing to maybe really directly answer your question, largely in existing assets as opposed to doing a lot of ground up development. So we have done some, but like right now, for example, we are not, with the exception of I think some self-storage ground up developments in New York City, we are not actually invested in any sort of active development projects, although and just to give you a sense too, we are a capital source for developers. So I'm not, like my firm, we're not on the ground, like going through the development process. So I mean, admittedly, I mean, I sort of see it a little bit from afar and hear about it. I'm not the one who's like at the meetings trying to get developments through, sort of thing. So I mean, I know a little bit about it, but this would definitely be, a little bit of a learning process for me too, being sort of more on the front lines here. But yeah, so maybe, sorry if I'm talking too much about it, but I mean, I think not a ton of not a ton of current active direct hands-on experience trying to get properties developed, if you will.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Any more questions about that? We could probably, yes, Sally?
So going back to your exposure to the fascinating world of urban studies, talk a little bit more about, sort of at a high level, about what you were exposed to and what was the content or substance of your studies in that field.
Yeah, so admittedly it was a little while ago, 20 years or so ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I went to, just give you a little more background. I went to Haverford College, which is a very small liberal arts school outside Philadelphia, for those who don't know. And we have, Haverford has sort of a partnership with Bryn Mawr, which is an all women's college very close by. And Bryn Mawr offered this actual, it's called the Growth and Structure of Cities major, which I found really interesting. And so I took a handful of classes, some of them that were very specific about, I would say more so looking at the history of planning. So we would study how, various cities grew and developed. We would talk about it on sort of like a sociological level as well, not just always a physical level. So it was more than just a very strict, how are cities formed? How do they develop? How are they laid out? It was, a little bit bigger picture than that at times. So that is, sort of what we did there. And then I'm trying to think, my my senior thesis was, I talked about, actually it was a little bit nuanced, but I studied about the influence of Native American gaming and the influence of that on like the development of Native American reservations. So that was sort of my thesis. So I spent a lot of time researching and understanding like how the decision to go ahead and move forward with like casino development and how that ultimately economically and physically like changed and altered different tribes and how they developed and built out their their tribal lands on a couple different levels. So that's a really very detailed answer to your question. But I mean, so it was a pretty broad scope, I would say.
Thank you.
Um, thanks for that. So I'm going to keep on moving here. So the planning board is about to open a hearing on an application for a project at 10 Converse Place. And also the planning board's proposing to go to town meeting in a couple town meetings, not at this next one, but the spring of 22, related to the North Main Street study. And the board would like to know how you think you can contribute to this work. One, the North Main Street potential rezoning, and the Converse Place petition that is now under the planning board's control.
Yeah, so I mean, first I have to admit I don't know a ton about either of the projects. I haven't spent a ton of time researching them, honestly. Um, how I think I can contribute um, is, I think once I better understand kind of the scope of exactly what's, either planned or what is sort of in process. I mean, I think I would hopefully be able to provide certainly the perspective of, as a resident, how, I would hope and love to see the physical environment and the physical space shaped and formed in a way that is consistent with like the size of our town and how we're looking for things to grow. And then I think also and this is where I have some learning to do, but I mean understanding how much and how to think through what the economic impacts of planning decisions have on the town. Meaning, if we allow a certain amount of density or a certain amount of development, what does that mean for the tax base for Winchester? Is that a good thing for us? Are we looking to try and increase the amount of commercial space and commercial density to try and impact the tax base? Is that not really a consideration? So I may admit I have some learning and studying to do if I were to become a part of this group. But I would imagine at a minimum, those would be certainly a couple of things that I would be, certainly thinking through, trying to understand and trying to help, the group make a thoughtful recommendation for, how, you know, those developments and how the guidelines for that development should take shape.
Great. Thank you for being honest, and I think that's great. We have probably time for one follow-up question. So if anyone else, maybe other than Diab and Sally, who've already spoken, if anyone had a follow-up, it's totally fine. If you don't have a follow-up question, the next question I think is a little quicker. All right, we'll just keep moving forward. So this is the final question. And you've somewhat alluded to it, but this is the direct question: is do you see any conflict of interest in relation to your other work that would prevent you from serving on the planning board? The reason why is because we need to have 5 members, or we would like, just like any board, to have 5 members there voting all the time. That is what it's important to make it a fair playing field for anyone that comes in front of the planning board to have a full board. So it's really important that you would not be recusing yourself due to potential conflicts of interest.
Yeah, understood. So I think the only conflicts I could see is that through my role at ERI, which is where I work, we do have an investment. I mean, we do have a couple of partners locally, specifically in the affordable housing space. So we have an investment in a company called Beacon Communities, which is a very large owner and developer of affordable housing in the Boston area. So I mean, a scenario would be if for some reason Beacon Communities came in and had whether it's a 40B project or something like that they were proposing for Winchester, that would obviously be a conflict for me, given, my company has an active investment in Beacon Communities, for example. So I guess that is the only example that comes to mind that I have. We don't really have a lot of exposure to, development projects in Massachusetts, but that's just one example. So, I mean, I think the only things I could see is if we had development partners through, my employer, my firm, that, if for whatever reason those developers came to Winchester and presented for the planning board, I would obviously have to recuse myself.
Thank you for that. Are there any follow-up questions here? If not, I'm going to turn it back to Susan.
Sure. Does anyone on the select board have any questions for Kurt? I don't see any. I think I'm liking what I'm hearing. I think that
Mike had a hand.
Oh,
so, I'm sorry.
Mike had a hand. There you go. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be quick, Susan. Just wanted to say thanks, Kurt. It's nice to see you. Appreciate you being willing to serve the town, and I think it looks like your background is exactly what we need. As you know, we have a lot of these larger projects that have kind of complicated financing that are part of them. So that background that you have is just really critical right now, I think, for town government and volunteers. And it's really nice to see that you're a board member with Habitat for Humanity as well. Just such a great a great nonprofit organization. And so just want to say thanks to you for being willing to serve. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, no, appreciate it. And actually, you talked about conflicts. I should have mentioned that too. I suppose if Habitat for Humanity was looking to do a project in Winchester, I would also want to recuse myself because I'm on the board of Habitat Greater Boston, and Winchester does fall within the footprint of Habitat Greater Boston. We're doing some projects over in Malden right now, actually.
Okay.
And I guess I should ask the planning board. Does the planning board have any further questions for Kurt? And I see lots of shaking of heads, so I'm guessing no. So it turns out, Kurt, that you are our sole contestant for this seat on the planning board. I suppose, I guess, Susan, I don't know whether you or I calls the vote, if that's even correct English. I
believe Brian was going to.
But
I would.
Yes, someone would.
Start.
Yes, someone would still. It's actually anyone but Diab or Susan could make the motion to for a vote.
A motion to appoint. Yeah, go ahead.
I can make a motion if it's necessary. So I move that we appoint Kurt Spring to the planning board vacancy term to expire March 2022. Is that correct?
Correct. Second.
Is it? All right, so I'll do a roll call vote of the select board. Mariano,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well.
And I will do similar for the planning board. Let's spin my random dial. I Ching,
Yes.
Sally,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So congratulations, Kurt. Welcome to the planning board. Our first
Great,
meeting
thank
is,
you.
your first meeting is tomorrow night.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Brian, will you onboard Kurt?
Of course.
Okay. Well, I guess we have to bring the planning board part of this to a close. Because I think the rest is up to the select board. So if there was a motion to adjourn the planning board meeting,
I would move to adjourn the planning board meeting.
and is there a second?
I second.
Excellent. Roll call vote, please. Cheryl Wolf.
Aye.
I Ching Scott.
Aye.
Sally Dale.
I
Deab Juria says aye as well. Thank you very much, select board. And thank you once again, Kurt, and we will see you soon. And have a great rest of your evening.
Great.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you,
everyone.
Brian.
Appreciate
I
it.
forgot Brian.
Bye.
Sorry.
See you soon.
It's okay.
Bye.
I'm going to call him tonight anyway, right? So,
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. Bye.
all right. See you later.
All right, so moving forward with the rest of the select board's agenda, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time because I know we have a hearing slated for 7:40. I think we have time for 8 minutes of public comment. If anybody's here for public comment, I know that was something that people were talking about at the last meeting. So I'll open it up for public comment. I'm not seeing anyone raise a hand. If you're just an attendee and you would wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Oh, well, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close public comment. And Lisa, can we go ahead with the donations and your report, if that's possible?
Sure. Let's
Sure.
start with the donations.
Do you want me, I move that we accept a donation of $44,000 from the Winchester Seniors Association to the Council on Aging to purchase a van to assist with medical transportation through the Council of Aging's transportation services. Also a donation of $140 for appreciation of services for the Council on Aging's gift account.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mike,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So Lisa.
Great, thank you. So I will combine my report and the votes needed from the select board tonight. There are a number of new positions and people that I'm very excited to be announcing tonight that'll be joining the team in Winchester. I first want to start with a sustainability director. After a great screening process and a lot of wonderful candidates, we have selected Ken Pruitt to be the town's first sustainability director. He's the current energy manager for the town of Arlington, Massachusetts. His start date will be on October 12th, so there's no action needed on the board tonight. Any questions or comments?
I think it's great. I know it was a very thorough search and you had a lot of good candidates, and I'm very pleased.
Great. Moving on to the Human Resources Director. I'm pleased to announce that we have selected Michael Town, who is the current Deputy Director of Labor Relations for the state's Executive Office of Health and Human Services, to be the next HR Director. His start date will also be October 12th. And multiple interviews were conducted with internal senior staff. And again, there was a lot of great candidates for this position. Because the start date is in October, there's no action needed by the board tonight. Okay, I'll keep going and then certainly you can comment later.
Yeah, please.
Kristen Romaine, a licensed mental health counsel with experience in patient care and case management, will be the town's first mental health and wellness social worker. Again, this was a great process with a number of different departments. and folks that are going to be specifically working with this position, including members of the Health Department, Council on Aging, Police Department, and Human Resources. Again, a great pool of candidates, and we're lucky to get Kristen on board. Her start date will be September 19th, so I'm asking the board to waive the 15-day waiting period.
I move that we waive the customary 15-day wait period for Kristen Romaine for mental health and wellness social worker.
Second.
Roll call vote. Rich,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well.
Great. And then for the Disability Access Commission, there are 4 positions, and we have all incumbents: Chris Durham, Robert McGillicuddy, Susan McGonigal, and Barbara O'Connell. They're all being reappointed for terms to expire August 31st, 2024.
That's excellent. Okay.
Great. Just a few other things to announce. Just an update on the Waterfield Lot Task Force. There was another meeting tonight, as well as a public comment period. We've been receiving a good number of public comments via email as well. I want to let the public know they can still email comments to townmanager@winchester.us. And for more information, we have a lot of information up on our website at winchester.us/Waterfield. You'll see a lot of the items that we've discussed posted on that website as well. And we'll also be posting all the public comment there. We do ask folks to try to bring us their public comments by September 16th, but certainly if you're sending them afterwards, we will consider them as well on a rolling basis. The next meetings for the task force will be Monday, the 20th. So a week from today, that meeting will be from 5 to 7 p.m. And then there'll be another meeting on the 30th, also from 5 to 7 p.m. We did get an email from the state saying that there were the first 4 human cases of West Nile virus reported by the Department of Public Health. So they've raised the risk level in 27 communities, including Winchester and surrounding communities, from moderate to high. September is the month with the highest infection rates. So certainly you can go online to mass.gov, search for West Nile virus, and there's more information on that website. Also, we have our next COVID testing clinic on Wednesday, September 15th from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. It is $20 per test, but it is waived for town employees and for hardship reasons. Go online to winchester.us again for looking up COVID testing to find out how to register. And I also just want to thank the facilities team for doing great work in getting our schools ready for a successful opening. I know there's a lot of challenges of the buildings, getting them ready, but I just want to thank them for that. Any questions or comments?
Anybody on the board have any comments? I don't always remember to ask this, but if anybody has an announcement, any of the board members has an announcement or a comment to make, please go ahead. Rich.
I have an announcement if I could.
Yeah.
So this weekend, obviously, we have Town Day Saturday. We'll have fireworks at 7:30. A great time to come out and support our local merchants. I know a lot of organizations will be downtown, so it should be a great day. And then the following weekend, we have it's our Glen Doherty Spirit Weekend. We'll have Spirit Night downtown starting at 5 o'clock. Main Street and Thompson Street will be closed. We'll have many organizations downtown again from the high school and various youth sports selling their spirit wear. There's a football game at 7 o'clock. There'll be live music on Main Street. It should be a great time for the town to come together, show our community spirit, support the high school football team as they take on Reading, and just have a nice night. Hopefully the weather cooperates, and a great time for the community to get out and revisit our merchants downtown and help support our local economy. So I hope everyone can join us, and hope to see everyone there, both events.
Great, thank you. And I didn't know that there were fireworks. That's great to hear.
7:30, not 9, because it gets dark earlier.
Oh, that's true.
Saturday.
Okay. Good note. Thank you. I guess that's it. And so we should probably go into our hearing, or our three hearings, none of which should be very long, but let's go ahead and we'll do the controller's report as part of the business, part of our business agenda.
Go ahead, Susan.
Right. So this is we're going to start with Eversource, right, Beth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have Eversource grant location petition to install approximately 5 feet of conduit within the public right-of-way on Cox Road. The improvements are necessary to provide underground electrical service to the home at 17 Cox Road. Engineering and DPW have reviewed and we have no comment. Thank you.
So any comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, I guess I open the hearing. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this 5 feet of conduit? I'm not seeing anyone. So I'll go ahead and close the hearing.
So I move that we approve a grant of location to N-Star Electric Company doing business as Eversource Energy to install approximately 5 feet of conduit in Cox Road to service number 17 Cox Road.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Mariano,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I was going to ask who the phone number was, and now I know.
Oh, it's mine.
Yes.
I'm having problems with my computer, my laptop, so I have to call in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So next, I think we have some traffic questions.
Yep. If you want me to go ahead, I can share my screen.
Okay.
I don't know if Lisa or Patty are able to let me do that.
Oh.
Perfect. Sorry, just one second. There we go.
Yep.
Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So the first public hearing tonight we're having is for the installation of stop signs. We had a request from residents to look at installing a four-way stop or a two-way stop at this intersection of Jefferson Road and Lawson Road. The TRC recommendation was to actually install a two-way stop here, so the proposed stop signs are on Lawson Road where they intersect Jefferson. We felt based on the configuration here, it made sense to have Jefferson be the through street with the angles that are out there. And I have a photo. This is looking west on Jefferson. So the intersecting streets here are Lawson Road. So the recommendation is to install the stop signs at this location. Happy to take any questions or comments.
I think that, I've driven through there and been sort of unsure of what to do, I think the stop signs make a lot of sense. Any questions from the board? I guess there are none. So I will open the public hearing. If anyone is here from the public who would like to comment, please raise your hand and we'll let you speak. And I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, I see Katie Sewell has raised her hand. Hope I'm pronouncing that close to right. So Patty, is Katie able to speak now?
Yes, she should be. She's
Okay.
in there with you.
Okay, please go ahead. I think you might have to unmute yourself as well.
Can you hear me now okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you for coming.
I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate you considering the additional stop signs. My family lives at the corner of Jefferson and Lawson Road, and we do notice since the 2 stop signs that were installed on Lawson Road, which was an improvement, that traffic on Jefferson Road seems to flow a lot quicker. And I know myself, I have 3 young children, and there are a lot of young children in the neighborhood that play in the road. And it's kind of a blind intersection at that point, and there are a lot of construction vehicles and visitors to the neighborhood that might not expect young children. So I think it would be very helpful to have the additional stop signs just to slow people down a bit.
So I just want to clarify, and I think Jay Gill might be here, but I believe there was a miscommunication earlier this year with DPW in terms of actually installing these signs. So this is kind of, I guess, a retroactive vote. These 2 stop signs may have been prematurely installed by DPW early this year without the board's vote. So tonight is to just kind of reconcile that vote with, I guess, the action that was taken in the field. And I don't know if Jay wants to mention anything else. Our recommendation is, or TRC's recommendation is not to install a 4-way stop at this intersection. My feeling is it doesn't meet the warrants under the MUTCD, which is the governing document. It's based on the amount of traffic that flows through this neighborhood, which is fairly low volume.
Yes, Madam Chairman, Jay
Go
Gill.
ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Jay.
Just you know, I just want to let you know our work order system actually works. A little too early, so I apologize for that. This area is an area where, you know, it's a tough intersection. I think that, you know, it's a great place to have these 2 stop signs. I think it will help slow down. The sight distance is really tough on the Jefferson Road side when you're coming down through Boston Road. So I know DPW is in favor of this.
So we're not talking about, this is the one, somebody told me, I couldn't remember which intersection it was, that the stop signs had already been put up. So this is the one where the signs are already up.
Yeah.
And
correct.
And it seems like it's an improvement. And I understand the thinking that according to the, you know, the state rules and the handbook for traffic control, that this does not have as much traffic as would warrant a 4-way stop sign. So we're going to try it this way for a while anyway.
Right. Yeah, okay. That's the recommendation. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So I guess I'll go ahead and ask if there's anyone else from the public who wishes to speak.
There are 2 more people.
I see.
I'll move them
Okay.
in.
I see David
Janice.
Hennessy and Doris or Janice. So go ahead.
I just brought Doris.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Something must have clicked on my end. I didn't.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, I recognize your name.
I actually lost you for a minute there, so maybe when I was clicking to get back,
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So Doris is our consultant that's
Right.
here from Weston Sampson for the stormwater.
She's here for something else.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So
you.
Mr. Hennessy, I guess.
Hi, thank you for the time. Really just a follow-up question. I guess this may be more toward Jay Gill, but I am curious about the town's ability to trim back trees and things that are situated on people's property but hang into the roadways. I agree the 2 stop signs have been manageable and have made that intersection safer and slower, but there still exists a problem that at that intersection, the visibility, even when you pull up to the stop sign, the visibility to look left or right and see if there's traffic coming, which if we were able to trim that back to some degree, would certainly improve the visibility to see the kids on their bikes and people walking and things like that. It's somewhat overgrown on all four corners of that intersection. I just didn't know if the town has the right or the ability to trim back the bushes and trees and things to improve the sight lines. Thanks.
We can look at that. I think if it's private trees, would have to get permission unless it's a public safety issue, which it could be. But we can look into it and talk to the resident that lives in that area if we can trim those trees back.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hennessy. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And I guess we need to, as a formality, we should have a vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I move that we approve the installation of stop signs on Lawson Road at the intersection with Jefferson Road.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mike. So roll call vote, Mike,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Let's go ahead.
So the next conversation we're going to have is about the area behind the Winchester High School. So this is the neighborhood in the plan here. Winchester High School is at the very bottom. Swan Street's at the very top. And we have Spruce Street, Holland Street, Nelson Street that run in sort of a north-south direction, and Oak Street that runs east-west parallel to Swan Street. So we got a request probably about a year ago asking us to look specifically at the intersection of Spruce and Oak and to put in a four-way stop there. As TRC was reviewing this in our conversations, we kind of expanded it to include the intersection of Holland and Oak Street. So the TRC recommendation is to install stop signs on Oak Street where it intersects with Spruce Street. We did not recommend the installation of a four-way stop at this intersection because Oak Street on the west side, the train track side here, has very few homes, and so there's not a lot of traffic. So when you look at the MUTCD standards in terms of traffic volumes, this intersection really doesn't meet that standard because that Oak Street is a dead end and has very few homes on that end. The one thing we did recommend beyond what the requester had asked for was the installation of a four-way stop at Oaken Holland. So at this location, there's existing stop signs on Holland Street, but Oak Street is a through street. And we felt that if anything, so typically when you install a four-way stop, you're trying to kind of balance conflicting movements, or you're trying to highlight if you keep it a two-way, you're trying to highlight one street as a sort of a larger volume than the other. In this case, Holland Street has more traffic typically than Oak Street because this is the street that folks use when we don't have Swan Street closed to bring their kids down to the back of the high school commonly. So they either use Spruce Street or Holland Street. And so right now that two-way stop on Holland Street, folks will either assume that there's already a four-way stop because Oak feels like a lesser street than Holland Street. And also there's just a lot of pedestrian traffic, kids walking down Holland Street to get to the high school. And so a stop on Oak Street would allow for safer crossing of those pedestrians. A stop on both Oak Street at this location at Holland Street and the stop at Oak Street on Spruce Street would allow for safer crossing for pedestrians walking from Swan Street down towards the high school. So this is just what it looks like today. This is Holland Street looking down towards Winchester High School, and you can see the existing two stop signs here with Oak Street being the through. So that's our current recommendation. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions from the board? I would just say this is a very thickly settled area. And yes, there are a lot of pedestrians and back and forth going to the high school. And, you know, even when school isn't in session, you know, people go to the field that way. So yeah, I think that it's important for this to be safe. Yeah. So seeing nothing, nobody's raising their hand on the board, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and ask people from the public to, if you wish to speak, go ahead and raise your hand. I see Dawn Johnson. We'll go ahead and let you speak. You might have to unmute yourself as well.
This is my husband, Gary, actually.
Oh, all right.
We're at 50 Holland Street, and I'm all for the four-way because I've noticed since we're on the bike path now, a lot of people on bikes just blow right through the stop signs, and it's probably an accident waiting to happen because of the lack of the other two signs being up. The other thing is, I think eventually you're gonna have to take a look at Holland Street possibly becoming a one-way, because we have traffic from the high school, the bike path, people parking on the street. It's not that wide of a street. We've got an auto school that drives around here constantly. And I just think there's just a lot of traffic that goes through here. And I think, you've got people on bikes on a Saturday afternoon, you've got cars parked, and people are trying to get through in another vehicle. It's just, there's been a lot of congestion here. And like I said, I'm all for the four-way stop, but I also think that eventually we're gonna have to look at the amount of traffic that does go through the street.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? I'm not seeing any hands raising. So last call. Anyone want to speak on this stop sign question?
So,
yes.
I mean, if there's no members of the public, I
Right.
would like to take the last comment about looking at one-way street. And I know other towns and cities have created, there's a thing called super blocks. And this is a good place where it might make sense to investigate slowing down traffic by making one-way streets with, for example, Holland Street going one way away from the high school, but then also one way away from Swanton Street, meeting on Oak Street, and then Spruce Street in the other way, going one way from Oak Street to Swanton Street and to the high school, and then cars have to make a little bit of an L shape to get out to Swanton Street. That might be something that we might want to talk to the neighbors about, if they would be willing to. A little bit of an inconvenience getting out of the neighborhood, but that would really slow down vehicular traffic and make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. Not something that we will consider tonight, but I think that for a future neighborhood meeting, it would make sense to consider doing something like that in that location.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there is a lot of, the bike path is on the streets in this area, so.
Yeah, that would be my only concern. We'd have to, if we did make Holland one way, we'd have to think about how we would reroute the bike path, because it is technically the on-road route on Holland Street. So obviously we'd have, bikes would be allowed to go in one direction, then we'd have to find sign the path for bikes going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So yeah, certainly not impossible. Yep.
But yeah, so I think that might be something we might want to consider for some neighborhood meetings. But with that, I move that we approve the installation of 2 stop signs on Oak Street at the intersection of Spruce Street, as well as 2 stop signs on Oak Street at the intersection of Holland Street to make that a 4-way stop.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
I vote yes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm hoping to take some of these things out of order just to sort of use our time efficiently. And I would like right now to move the the acting town manager item up from number 5 up to number 1. We did discuss and decide that we would have, put out a sort of a posting to all of our very experienced and dedicated town hall senior management and senior staff, because we are in need of an acting town manager starting in October. And Beth Rudolph threw her hat in the ring right away. And we've had her letter of interest and her resume, which is very extensive. And she's been town engineer for a number of years, and been involved in a number of complicated projects, and also run her department. So I'd like to go ahead and have, interview her and have the board talk with her. And I know you're sitting right there. And, this is an important moment for the town, and I'm very heartened that you are, willing to do this and take on this challenge. So I just ask you maybe, Beth, to, tell us a little bit about what your motivation is to take on this challenge and what you might want to accomplish.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to be considered for this position. I've worked for the town since 2004. I came in as the assistant town engineer, and then when Bob Connor retired in 2010, I became the town engineer. I've had the privilege of working for this town, working with the staff we have in town, working with the very dedicated boards and committees we have in this town on so many wonderful projects, challenging projects that have ultimately, I think, gone to better the town and move us in good directions in a variety of engineering and non-engineering activities. I work extensively with the planning board. I work with the Zoning Board of Appeals. I work with the Conservation Commission. I work with the Health Department. So I've had a variety of expertise and experience working with all the folks in municipal government, and it's really been a privilege. And I'm very interested in taking that skills that I've learned here in the engineering department and applying them to the acting town manager role. So I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
So would anybody else on the board? Oh, let's see. I think Mike might have had his hand up first, and then Mariano.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Beth, so much for applying. We're still going to keep you as our unofficial traffic engineer, though. So I know you think you're getting out of it by doing this. This might be the only reason that you're applying. But again, thank you. You're an absolute rock star, and have been since I've been on the board, and prior to that. And your level of skill and professionalism is really unmatched. So thank you. It's really a great option for the town. We're really lucky to have you. So just wanted to extend my appreciation and support for you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So
I should. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the goal is for this to really be a team effort. Obviously, there's a dedicated group of department heads that I work with, acting assistant town manager, and the comptroller and I, when this was first discussed as a possibility, met and discussed, the very collaborative relationship that we would have going forward if this was to move forward with the board in terms of the support that would be provided both to the acting town manager position and the extent of knowledge that they have of town government and their goals. So thank you. Just wanted to mention that.
So this is probably the most important thing that this board does, is to appoint a town manager, an acting town manager. Of all the responsibilities we have as street commissioners approving stop signs like we just did, as local licensing authority, the one the one responsibility that the charter gives us that to me is the most important thing is to appoint the person who will lead our municipal departments, and that's the town manager. I'm as a fellow engineer, I find Beth's performance as an engineer to be fantastic, but also as a former chair of this board and having worked with Beth, having gone into Boston to meet with the MBTA with her, and watching her leadership and her advocacy for the town. I know that she can do the job of town manager. She can, she's not just the town engineer. She can be the town manager, the acting town manager. And I absolutely, I am delighted that she has applied, and I think we will be in great hands.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Rich, is there anything you'd like to ask or comment on?
Nope, I'm all set. I wish Beth good luck,
Thank you.
and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
New capacity.
So I have motion language. Sorry, I see that Mike has his hand.
Mike. Again?
Oh, sorry. No, I just forgot to mention, I was really mostly concerned that if I didn't vote for you, Beth, that my driveway would get plowed in by DPW mysteriously during the year. So it's really self-preservation as much as anything else. So thanks.
We'll give Jay a call to make sure that it still doesn't get plowed.
We'll make sure.
So I have language here from our town council. So I move that the select board designate Beth E. Rudolph to be acting town manager for the town of Winchester, effective on October 2nd, 2021, and serving until a new town manager is appointed, subject to negotiation and board approval of mutually agreeable compensation to Ms. Rudolph.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Mariano?
Yes.
I vote yes as well.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
This
I really
is great.
appreciate your support, and I really look forward to working with all of you in this new capacity. Thank you.
Okay. And so, as town engineer, you're up because we need to talk about the MS4 regulations, which need to be updated.
Yes.
So please.
Thank you.
I just brought Jerice back in.
Thank you, Patty.
Is there anyone else?
Jess Wall from Anderson Krieger may be able to join us. She was balancing between two different select board meetings tonight. So if you
she has not attended. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again here. Everybody see that okay?
I can see it.
Great, thank you. So this is our second meeting to talk about the rules and regulations of the proposed changes to the town's rules and regulations for storm drains and public sewers. I was here back on August 2nd where we introduced the topic. So just by way of background, these regulations were adopted back in June 2007. At that time, we brought the regulations up to the standards of the then current MS4 permit requirements. There was a new permit that was issued and became effective in 2018. So this next update is to bring those regulations in compliance with the current MS4 permit requirements, and to also expand the requirements for by right construction projects. So those are projects that are permitted through building permits by the building department. And that piece in particular goes beyond the scope of the requirements of the MS4. The section on sanitary sewer regulations is largely unchanged from the existing regulations, so really not much to discuss there. As discussed at the board's meeting on August 2nd, we went through and issued the draft regulations for public comment. So we accepted comments between August 5th and August 26th. And during that time, we received 3 written comments, an extensive comment letter, which was excellent, from the Friends of Winter Ponds, a comment from Al Weiler, our building commissioner, and then a comment from Murray Hills, who is a private developer in Winchester. Staff went through and reviewed each of the comments with Anderson Krieger and Jerry Schwartz, who's our consultant from Weston Sampson. We prepared a formal response to comments document that I believe was in the board's packet, and that I sent out to each of the 3 folks who wrote in public comments, and I didn't receive any additional feedback from them. And we also, Anderson Krieger prepared an updated redline document that made some changes to the document in response to these comments. I would say most of the changes, their Friends of Winter Pond had several comments with respect to some of the definitions that we use, several clarifying comments in terms of clarifying sections of the regulations, which were excellent and really helped us to improve it. There were a few comments that we acknowledged that we did not incorporate at this time, and could be considered for future changes to the regulations, one of which was the rainfall data that we use. The Friends of Winter Pond advocated for using a higher rainfall amount than is currently kind of the town standard. We'll be looking to DEP when they update their stormwater regulations to see if they are going to move to that higher rainfall amount. And if they do, we consider revising our regulations to be in line with the DEP recommendation. So I was not planning to go comment by comment through all those comments we received. Happy if the board has specific questions. I have the document available. We can go through if there's specific questions. The one piece that I did want to focus on tonight, because I know this is something the board asked at the last meeting. This is the piece that we're doing kind of above and beyond what the MS4 permits require. So we've defined what we're calling a small development project in the regulations. And these proposed regulations are to manage stormwater runoff from what we're calling by right projects. Those are projects that don't have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeal, don't have to go to the Conservation Commission. These are projects that just can straight go to the building department and get a permit. So we're looking at, we've defined these small development projects as those that have an increase of 250 square feet or more of impervious area. This is the threshold we've been using for the past 5 or so years when we, as the engineering department, have reviewed ZBA petitions. So it would be consistent with our prior kind of regulations and policy in terms of reviewing these types of projects. If this goes forward, property owners would need to consider installing infiltration systems, rain gardens, or removing other impervious surfaces on their site to offset that new impervious area and to offset the additional runoff that's created by that. Excuse me. We felt, I know there was some conversation at the board's last meeting about what that threshold should be, whether it should be 250 square feet or something larger. We did receive several comments both for and against that 250 square foot threshold in the letters we received. At this point, it's the staff recommendation to keep that 250 square foot threshold. I know that it may create additional work for some homeowners, but we felt like it was important given the investment the town has made in our flood mitigation program and the unknowns as it relates to increased precipitation from climate change, that we really try to mitigate for any new impervious area at this low threshold amount that is created in our community. And again, it's just for projects that require building permits. So if you're repaving a driveway, if you're building a patio, if you're building a small shed in your yard, those are things that don't typically trigger building permits unless they're part of a larger project. One of the things I did do was to look at the comparable communities. This is one of the things the board had asked at our last conversation. So Arlington, just our neighbor next door, has a threshold of similar regulations of 350 square feet. Belmont has a regulation that talks about increasing impervious area coverage on the lot to greater than 25% of the lot's total area, and then it triggers some additional stormwater requirements. Brookline has a standard of 250 square feet of land disturbance or any activity that increases flow into the municipal storm drain system, which could be more strict than the regulations we're proposing here. Devon's has a 0 threshold, so the 0 square foot threshold. So basically any new amount of impervious area requires action from the property owner. Newton has a requirement for a trigger for 4% of the lot size or 400 square feet of impervious area, whichever is less. Somerville has a trigger of 100 square feet of constructed or reconstructed pavement or new roof area. And Watertown has a trigger of 500 square feet of impervious area. So we're, I would say, probably closer to the lower end of this list in terms of the threshold. But I think given our history of flooding and the unknowns that we face going forward with climate change, I think it's important that we try to maintain this 250 square foot threshold. And with that, this is just kind of a repeat from the last time I was here. The first step has been checked off here, which is issuing the regulations for public comment. We're back here tonight to talk about those comments and any edits. We did recirculate the document to the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, ZBA, town staff, in addition to putting it out to the general public. And as I noted previously, these updated regulations have to be approved before our annual report is due to EPA on September 27th. So happy to discuss any comments the board has or take any other comments from folks.
So does anyone have any comments or questions? Anyone on the board? I just have one sort of clarifying comment, and I'm glad you mentioned this. The question I got from some neighbors is about replacing their driveway. You know, they're very conscious that their driveway is an impervious area and it's blacktop, and you know it's nothing. There's nothing terribly environmentally sound about it.
Right.
But they're worried that if they just want to replace that, you know, because it's cracked or something, whether they would, you know, trigger this requirement.
So currently repaving of a driveway does not require a building permit. So would not trigger this. Yep.
Okay.
If it was done in concert with a larger project, if they were putting an addition on and, you know, redoing the driveway as part of that, it could be maybe looped into to the whole thing. And in some cases, you know, you might be able to, so say you're adding a small addition, you might be able to, you know, reduce the size for a driveway to offset that new impervious area that you created from your addition. We've seen a lot of people do that over the years.
Yeah, sort of trade off some of your driveway for a patio or something like that.
Yeah, and we see a lot of people, the projects that we review in front of the ZBA, a lot of times they'll be taking a patio and converting it to an addition. And so that is basically a zero balance, right, with impervious area.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Yes.
I just have a couple of questions. So Beth, you mentioned in your talk tonight that you received several letters for and against this section. I guess I'm a little curious. I thought you received 3 public comments.
Right. Yeah. So sorry, several was maybe too strong a word to use. So the Friends of Winter Pond spoke out in favor of the 250 square foot regulation. While the building commissioner had some concerns with the trigger being that low. And he was concerned that it could impact development of certain properties, and people may be less inclined to develop if they were concerned that they had to meet this trigger.
And I guess my next question is, do we have any sense, you know, I'm looking at the list provided, you know, I'm a little concerned we're not comparing apples and apples with the towns listed.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of urban settings. You know, has Lexington or a town such as that, you know, done anything like this that you're aware of?
I don't recall off the top of my head, Therese, if you're on the line, maybe you have my information here. If Therese is here from.
Yeah, sorry about that. I am online. Yeah, not offhand with Lexington. I want to say we did look briefly and didn't find anything. Can certainly take another quick look though.
So this is voluntary, right? Where this isn't part of the MS4. regulations that we need to do. So
Right. So this has been our requirement for projects that go to the ZBA currently. And so we'd like to reduce that to make it more consistent, because there's a lot of projects that you could be building a lot of the projects that go to the ZBA are kind of the smaller, it's like a non-conforming lot or a non-conforming structure, and they only have to go to the ZBA because they're missing, a foot of side yard setback or something, right? A lot of the projects we see by right are tear downs, where you're tearing down an existing house and increasing the footprint of a house, right? And those people don't have to do anything in terms of stormwater mitigation. So we're really trying to catch those projects that don't have to go through the ZBA or the Conservation Commission, but could have an impact, cumulative impact, certainly, even for these smaller projects, on the overall amount of runoff going to the town's water bodies.
So I guess my concern is it seems low to me, and I think almost prejudice people with smaller lots in the town that maybe want to put a small addition on, like a 10 by 15 up and down addition. To have to, possibly including in that project now spend, between engineering costs, systems, you're talking about maybe a $15,000, $20,000 increase to a project like that.
Yeah. So I mean, a 10 by 15 wouldn't trigger it because that's below our threshold. It's not based on lot area, but you're correct. For those projects that are over the 250 square foot threshold, they would have to hire an engineer. And they would, it's probably between $3,000 to $5,000 of additional costs would be my guess, in terms of if they did have to put in a system, if they could reduce impervious area somewhere else on their site, then obviously that's a more attractive way to do it, so that they're not having to put in a structure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I guess the amount of runoff that we're seeing from something of that size, versus somebody who's, maybe expanding or putting in a driveway or a patio, just doesn't seem, I just think it's unfairly prejudicing those people with small lots that are looking to do something like that, where they don't have the room, and I just think, some of these cities are, they're cities. I know Boston, I think, has 1,000 square feet as their rule. And I think there are other towns that haven't gone as far and as drastic as we're proposing here. It just concerns me, just the additional costs. I tend to agree with Al on this a little bit.
Yeah, we're certainly open to bumping that threshold up to a higher value if that's the way the board would like to go. Yeah.
I'd like to see something around 1,000 square feet. This is, again, voluntary. We're taking measures here that aren't necessarily required, but we're looking, to do our part as part of this. I just am worried that the impact it will have on those smaller lots, and people wanting to do, additions.
So 1,000 square feet of new impervious feels a little high to me. Some of the smaller lots are 6,500 square feet. So I don't think anybody on those smaller lots hopefully is adding a full 1,000 square feet of new impervious area, but certainly up to the board in terms of the direction you'd like to go.
I'm concerned, on a smaller lot, adding 950 square feet of impervious area is the flooding issues that it would cause to the neighbors, right? When we're talking about a 6,500 square foot or 5,000 square foot lot, that is already covered, probably 1,500 square feet are covered, and adding another 900 would, now that could result in all of the neighbors around having flooded basements. I think, I think 250 might be a little too small. I think 1,000 might be a little too much. I think maybe somewhere in the middle. I see Watertown has 500 square feet. Maybe that's the right answer. That's still higher than Arlington at 350, or I don't know. I don't know what the right number is, but I just know
Yeah, and I mean, it's a judgment call,
low and
right? There's
1,000 seems too high.
no perfect answer. So I think, to me, anything 500 square feet or below would feels reasonable to me. 1,000 feels a little too high.
I mean, I guess I'm concerned, 500 still seems a little small. I mean, I get Mariano's point, and I understand, I appreciate your feedback. I'm just, I mean, we're talking about adding significant costs possibly to these projects, and with, and I'm just not sure. I mean, have we identified this, I guess, as a problem in town? I mean, this is something we can.
We have, yeah, this has been something that we've had on our list to do for many years. And I don't think Brian Kelly's still on the line, but it's something we've discussed quite a bit, because we are missing most of those projects that we see in town, which is those projects where we have tear downs and new construction, a lot that's subdivided and went from, a single family where they split the lot into two and now they have 2 single family homes, or they're tearing down a single family and building a large multifamily home. Those are the projects that we're missing. Where we're generating a huge amount of new runoff from those properties.
So wouldn't those be in the redevelopment category in these regulations?
No, so under the MS4 regulations only apply to projects that disturb greater than 1 acre, which there's very few sites in Winchester that are 1 acre. So that's why we kind of created our own category in these regulations to try to catch those smaller projects.
Now, Beth, so if we set it at whatever, right, 500, 1,000, whatever it is, and somebody were to split one house and create 2, now by passing this, it doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to. It's just they would have to capture they would have to capture the rain from and the gutters and put it in like an underground cistern or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't prevent anybody from developing a site. And in fact, if we found like there was a site with all ledge, or there was a site that had terrible soils or whatever, then we would work with those people to kind of do the best they could in terms of the circumstances they have. So yeah, it's not gonna stop any from developing a site, but I do agree with Rich, it will add cost to those projects. Yeah. But in the long run, the cost to the town in terms of every new amount of impervious area that's created in this town adversely impacts the capacity that we've created as a result of our flood mitigation program. So
we just spent more than $3 million on capturing runoff, right? So
Yep.
And I guess the projects you're talking about, Beth, the subdividing of lots, that type of stuff. I mean, those would all be over 1,000 square feet, I would imagine.
Not necessarily. 1,000 square feet of new impervious area is quite a bit, right? You're looking at the building footprint, you're looking at the driveway. So it takes a lot to add 1,000 square feet of new impervious area.
Yeah, if you're subdividing a lot, though, you're building. I mean, I assume you're building 2 houses.
It depends, right? In some cases, there might be the house might be large with a lot of impervious area, and they're subdividing it and putting 2 smaller. I mean, every circumstance is different, but.
How do we feel about 750 square feet triggering this?
I feel fine with that. That was my initial inclination, but I hadn't really reviewed too many other communities. I did feel like 1,000 was a little bit too high. So I'd be happy with that. And it's something that we can change over time, right, Beth? I mean, if necessary, just to see if we're not capturing enough, or we've been in situations where people have strategically, moved right under our requirement, it's, so we're a little bit, the market, it can resolve itself pretty quickly. So, it may be something that we revisit on a yearly basis.
The point I would like to make is the sort of cumulative impact of multiple projects. There are streets where there are, small capes or small, like 1960s era houses that have become two families with giant parking area and driveway. And, that kind of redevelopment seems to strike a certain street or a certain area. And I'm just concerned about the whole cumulative impact in our little town with existing flooding problems.
Yeah, and I think
So I'm thinking that 500 seems like a better in-between point to me. Just looking at this list, 500 square feet, 350, and one is like 4% of lot size or 400 square feet, whichever is less, in areas that are very built out. And Winchester is pretty built out, at least the part of Winchester I live in. So that's what I would be concerned about.
And I guess just into your example, I think that would, certainly trigger what you're referring to, even at 750 square feet. If someone's adding a driveway and creating taking a cape and creating a two-family situation, I think that would certainly be well over 750 square feet at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just concerned that some of the like towns around us haven't enacted this yet. And, I think it's great to be proactive like this. I just, I guess someone who, looks at a lot of construction contracts and the costs of construction and how they've, increased, this adds, significant cost between an engineer, if you have to put a system in, we haven't really, I think Beth just touched on ledge. Up where, I live up here, there's ledge everywhere. So, I can appreciate the town wanting to work with people, but there's still, significant costs just on the engineering side to do something like this. And I think it's something we could change. If we see it to be a problem, we could certainly go downwards if that's the trend in this area, or certainly what's in the best interest of Winchester, then, we could certainly go down.
Well, Beth, the other question is, do you have to use impervious materials? If we had something like this, would it encourage people to really seriously look at using something that is pervious or more permeable?
Right. Sorry, that was kind of my point is, it's not necessarily, people don't necessarily have to put in like a structural system, right? You don't have to put in an infiltration system. You can, oftentimes, like I said, what we see are people trying to balance out, they remove a patio to add a small addition. Or you could put in a rain garden or something that's not as expensive. And it does often depend on the scope of what they're already doing. So if somebody's like, if it's a tear down and is a developer that's building a new house, it's nothing for them to add, a couple of cul-de-sac units and they already have the whole site disturbed. If it's a homeowner doing a small addition, then I agree with you. It's a different kind of situation. So I do think it kind of depends on the scale of the work. But personally, I would feel more comfortable with something closer to 500 square feet versus the 750. But obviously, it's up to the board in terms of your comfort level.
The only other point I would make is that the time to do something like this and to put in a system or a rain garden or to really think this through is when you're doing a project, not 3 years later when we change the number or when the impact is already being felt. So I think building this into the process for people who are doing work, it's time to do that in our town. We have a lot of flooding.
Yeah, and it's not just cost to the town, right? I've heard from several residents who, because of construction nearby, they've had to then add waterproofing to their basement or sump pumps or French drains, and those are costs that were incurred because of additional runoff from construction on other properties. And these are folks who didn't do anything to their property, it's just runoff from somewhere else. So I would be more comfortable closer to 500 also. Because I think there's a hidden cost, right? There's the cost to the person that's doing the construction, but there's the cost to the person that is downstream from the person doing the construction.
Would it make sense to look at what you're historically seeing for kind of additions and what you'd be capturing at different kind of thresholds? I guess I'm just saying, if you keep that threshold high, are you seeing a lot of projects that wouldn't be regulated by these, these updated regulations?
I don't know what kind of time we're looking at to do that kind of an investigation, look at the data. I also know, whatever the number is, people will figure out, how to just barely be under the number.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Like the speed limit,
I just know with Arlington and their experience, I think when they were looking at a higher threshold, there was concern about not capturing a lot of projects, and that their goal was to obviously affect change, and that's where they landed at their threshold. But no, that totally makes sense too. It's but you could totally set it at one threshold, like you said, and then relook at it and always revisit it, in another year or so.
Well, I would be more comfortable if it were the 500 to start anyway. So Beth, what should we do here? Do we want to approve everything else, or do we?
Yeah, I mean, I think just given the short time frame, ideally we'd try to get something completed tonight. If the board's not comfortable settling on a number, we could try to do what Therese suggested and kind of look at size of some of the recent building permits that we've had come through to see where that puts us.
I mean, do you have time to get this, finalized for the 28th if we put this off until the 27th?
Yeah, I mean, again, tonight would obviously be ideal. If the board is not comfortable moving in that direction, we can certainly come back on the 27th with additional information.
I would be in favor of that, but I'm only one person, really. What do we think? Mike, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to 500. I guess I'd like a little bit more of information before we move forward. The hard part is that when we look around at other communities like Arlington and Watertown, it's we really are unique in a lot of ways as far as our density, and we've identified over the past 20 years, severe issues with flooding that's only been exacerbated by construction. So, I'm happy to wait to see if we have a little bit more data, but I do think that probably us moving on something sooner than later is necessary. So, I don't think us going between 500 and 750 at this point. I mean, we're just kind of arbitrarily negotiating things that we don't have information to base on. So, I'm happy to wait if everyone's more comfortable for next meeting. But I also wouldn't be opposed to the 500 if it seems like that would be the recommendation from staff.
I'm very comfortable with the 500 square feet if that's the way the boards would like to go.
So I would be looking for a motion then.
So what do we need? What do you need authorization for, Beth?
So I think we would need authorization to approve the draft recommendation or draft regulations as final, with the condition that the impervious area threshold for the small development projects, the trigger would be set at 500 square feet if that's the direction the board's going, versus the 250 square feet that's currently proposed.
So moved.
Thank you.
So roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well.
Thank
you,
you.
Beth.
This is a huge accomplishment for the town. I just want to say how much I appreciate the board moving forward on this. It's a good thing for the town, I think. And yeah, we're happy to meet this MS4 requirement and happy to move us in this direction as well. Thank you.
Yeah, great. And thank you for all your work on it.
Thank you. And thanks to Doris and Jess
And-
Wall, who
yes.
have done a ton of work with us as well.
Yes, that's true. Thank you. Thank you all. So that brings us to the rec department's project for a sports court, the Mystic Sports Court, and then we will do the controller's report after that. So Nick, I believe you're here. There you go. Okay, go ahead. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you guys bringing me on tonight. I gotta share my screen at some point, but yeah, I'm bringing forth this evening a proposal on how we can fund a sport court here at the Mystic School Building. As you all know, is where the recreation department is housed. It's kind of twofold. One is asking for some different ways and some recommendations from the board on how we can fund this, but I'm hoping that we can set a precedent tonight, or at least have a discussion on the use of retained earnings for the recreation department. And that's really my biggest goal here. And it just happens to be that the Mystic Sport Court is the first project that I'd like to talk about and how we can fund a capital request. So let me just share my screen. Are you guys able to see the PowerPoint?
I can see it, yes.
Awesome. All right, so before we get into kind of the logistics of the actual sport court, I just want to do a quick review on how the recreation department is funded. What I've learned in my short time here in Winchester is a lot of people don't really understand the differences on how we change from a revolving account to an enterprise account back in 2011 and how that affected where we are today with the recreation department. So some of this might be a little bit of a review for you all, and you might know a lot about this, but I do want to just kind of get it out there and talk a little bit about it. So our enterprise account is basically designed to be self-sufficient so that we're paying for all of our staff benefits and expenses, and also to capture what are called indirect costs, which are costs back to other departments. And we basically fund several different small percentages of other budgets, such as DPW, town manager's office, comptrollers, HR, IT, etc. Our indirect costs are anywhere from $340,000 to $360,000 a year. So that's part of when we're putting together our budget. We have to figure out ways on how we're funding these additional costs. When you're in an enterprise account as well, people don't understand that being at Mystics, we're on the hook for a lot of costs that maybe other departments aren't. So for instance, we pay for our own cleaning company here. We don't have the same services that maybe you have at town hall. So there's a lot of different additional costs that go in when you have an enterprise account that we're on, that we have to kind of set our fees and be cognizant of when we're putting together our budget. Since the inception of the enterprise in FY11, the town has always allocated at Springtown meeting, an allocation to help us kind of cover some of those costs. And the allocation varies, but it's typically been $175,000 a year. So if you look at our indirect costs, it usually pays for about half our indirect costs every year. Over the last couple of years, it's been higher during COVID. So in FY21, they really had to bail us out. At the end of FY20, we lost $505,000, which was funded through our retained earnings. And FinCom really came to bat for us and helped us with the $405,000 allocation. This fiscal year, it's down to 290. We were kind of uncertain on how COVID is going to affect our programs. We rely heavily on our childcare. But our indirect costs were still in the $350,000 range for both of those years. We set our program fees to cover all our costs, to operate our programs, staffing, cover departmental overhead. And the goal is to kind of create a small profit as well. At the end of each fiscal year, if we do our homework right and we're doing a good job with our programming, our profit will be moved into a fund called retained earnings. And that's what we're going to kind of talk about tonight. So basically, when I took this job, during the interview process, everyone emphasized that your job, when you have an enterprise account, is to make profits, to make money. I think what we also need to discuss a little bit is that we also oversee all of the field accounts. And those are typical revolving accounts. A lot of people are confused about, you bring in all this money for the fields, where does it go? We get no money in the recreation department to fund our enterprise account through the fields. Fields are kept in two separate revolving accounts. It's managed through recommendations of the field management committee. This department spends a lot of time on fields, but we don't get any of those profits ever put back into our department. And all of these field accounts, the money that is spent on them are governed by specific revolving account bylaws. And I want to make the discrepancy between two accounts important, because as we get talking about capital expenditures, a lot of people look at certain things that are funded through the rec department, but typically the funding through capital is for fields, which isn't necessarily the same as funding a program that helps with the enterprise. We're one of the few departments that can really build a big amount of revenue if we invest in our department. And everyone wins when the rec department is bringing a lot of revenue, because the whole goal is to reinvest back into other town departments through indirects, and also to create better environment for our residents. So tonight, we're going to talk about different ways that we can kind of fund these capital projects that we want to bring to the recreation department. And of course, the traditional way is through capital expenditures, and I know that. But first and foremost is I want to talk about retained earnings. So when I took the job in 2020, right before the end of the fiscal year, we had about $600,000+ in retained earnings. And as you know, when we ended that fiscal year through the shutdown, we had to fund that big deficit for being shut down in March, which is $505,000. So our retained earnings were almost whittled down to almost nothing, in $100,000 range. So the only thing that we have history in this town since 2011 is that our retained earnings have only been used to fund operational needs, such as end of the year shortfalls, as we did last year, or to fund COLA or union increases in pay. Other departments, typically there's a general fund transfer when there's a COLA increase. We fund it ourselves through our retained earnings. Nothing else has been approved to use for retained earnings. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about that tonight, and how we can maybe set a precedent or talk about ways to take, because retained earnings are basically the fruit of our labor here in the recreation department. And we all want to be able to offer really high-end programs and opportunities. We want to be able to use some of that retained earnings to kind of fund that. Additionally, just a little bit more background, is the only way that we can use our retained earnings is through a vote at town meeting. So right now, our retained earnings, we actually ended up doing okay last year, even through the COVID. We are able to build up retained earnings to $245,000. I mean, we were subsidized with that allocation. However, we did really work really hard to try to increase our program opportunities, think outside the box, and we were able to turn a profit last year. This $245,000 is pending DOR review and certification, which Stacy is going through right now. So it could fluctuate a little bit, but that's pretty much where we're at. The second way that we can fund these initial capital projects is through capital committee. The thing that I want to note is we're always up against a very difficult situation in capital, like going against police, fire, and new roofs, and DPW projects. a lot of times things like recreation department capital kind of falls way down the list, and it makes sense. You know, there's certain things in the town that need to get done. And so I'm looking at different ways to fund these so that we can continue to grow, we can continue to invest in town. You will look back and say maybe there was some recreation department capital, but again, that a lot of those were fields. So we're talking like turf fields or playgrounds, and that doesn't have a direct benefit to enterprise fund. We need capital projects that are going to help us raise revenue and raise funds. The third way that we can go about doing some of these things is through donations or gift accounts. We did have a Friends of Rec 501c that was active in the town until about mid 2015. It's now a defunct group. People that are running it are stewards. They're holding on to that in hopes that we can get more interest, and we can get people, you know, new blood in there to take over. The issue with that right now is it's been difficult to get volunteers to take on this board position during COVID. And a lot of the candidates that I've targeted are on other boards or committees or have conflicts of interest. So right now that group has just under $100,000 in their account. They're just hoping that some, you know, vested citizens will jump on there and help us raise some money so that we can continue to invest in these programs. Additionally, there's some gift accounts in town. Right now, there's a gift account for the rec department with $24,000 in it. Before Stacy was here, I think what happened is when there was money gifted to the rec department, it went into one fund. Some of that funding was restricted funds. Some of it was general use. The issue is there's not good records kept. So in order to go back and find out how I can use that, I have to figure out what was restricted, what wasn't, and what was spent. Now that's a lot of work going back into select board meeting minutes. And I think it's going to be very difficult to figure that out at the end of the day. The sad news about that is if we don't figure it out, there's going to be $24,000 sitting in a fund that doesn't go get put to good use. So that's another issue and another option that we have, but there might be more research that needs to be put into that. Now working with Stacy, anytime we get new funding for the rec department goes in separate funds. We have Neighbors Helping Neighbors funds. We have Council on Common as separate funds, so that'll never happen again. But right now, we have to figure out where that $24K can be spent. So what I'm bringing you tonight, after that brief little kind of overview of where we're at with our accounting, is the engineering design for Mystic School Sport Court. So what I'm asking is, how can we fund this? Because we need to get a design and we need to get engineering done to figure out the costs for this project that we'd like to get done. So right now, the hot top basketball area that's at the Mystic School is beyond the point of being repaired. I've walked it with Jay Gill and his staff. It needs to be taken out. If we renovate the space, it can be used for a multitude of recreation department programs. It'll also be a huge benefit to our child care program, which is basically the cash cow that keeps this department running. We're asking for about $20,000. I've talked to Chris Huntress of Huntress Associates. He thinks $20,000 is a very fair area to engineer and design a multi-sport court that enhances our programs and brings us more recreational revenue generating opportunities. This court will allow for additional programs such as basketball, volleyball, tennis, pickleball, and street hockey programs. Once we have the engineering and the price set through this funding, we would figure out additional funding for what the final fee is. So right now there's a similar court being put in Newbury. The final price came in $175,000, except their court is a little bit bigger, and they're looking at 6 basketball courts. So I would assume that our sport court would come in that ballpark, and maybe even a little bit less. So the funding opportunities that we'd have with that, would we be able to raise some private funding, could tap into that 501c charitable organization that has about $80,000 in their account. We have our preschool has a parent advisory committee that would help raise funds, and we could use some grant money. We just hit on an EEC grant for about $80,000. We could use some of that money and possibly through retained earnings again for the next fiscal year, depending on how the rec department does this year. Now I have a few pictures of where we're at. So this is where a lot of people send their children for childcare, and this is what the current hot tub looks. We have one basketball hoop. There's a hill when it rains, all the rocks and stuff go on the court. It's really starting to be a detrimental area where if it continues to break down, it might not even be safe for kids to play on. So I have a few pictures of what a sport court could look like. So this is a smaller sport court, fenced in, very safe, has all different types of programs and athletic markings on it. And an area view of what I envision to kind of bring in. So as you can see, it's lined for foursquare, pickleball, tennis, basketball, hopscotch, shuffleboard, volleyball, hockey. This would be an amazing addition to our programming. Can you imagine dropping your kids off for childcare? Not only have they have opportunity to go out and play there, we could contract a tennis coach to come out and do tennis lessons. We have basketball lessons. We could do pickleball, all different types of things. Be a one-stop shop thing where you could create additional revenue. So one of the things when I was talking to Mark Toogood about putting this together is he said, well, what could be the return on investment? So one of the things we could do is we could start creating new programming. And that's what we want to do in the town, is bring new programming to the residents. When we bring in new programming, we price it out, create more revenue, and make a better, healthy department. It also will help with those childcare programs that I mentioned. So these are just some of the samples that we talked about in the rec department. We could start a junior street hockey program. There's not anything like that in town right now. It'd be similar to a junior league basketball program. It could be for the younger kids as a startup program. Junior league basketball has 300 kids enrolled. We could have sport-specific clinics, as I mentioned. Pickleball lessons, leagues, and rentals. The towns next door to us are creating these programs, and they're making a fortune in pickleball. We could have outdoor volleyball programs, leagues, and rentals. We've talked about that in field management committees. We could do special birthday party packages. There's not really great outdoor space in this town for birthday parties. We could do really cool birthday party packages. And then I ran some quick numbers. If we just added 3 or 4 of these in year one in street hockey leagues, we're talking a minimum of 120 kids, and I think that's really low if we did a street hockey league. The net revenue at the end of the day could be $16,000 in year one. If we did 10 different sport clinics, we could have an easy $5,000 in one season. Pickleball lessons, we could run 14 different offerings, 7 4-week beginner intermediate classes, and that could be $3,200. So very realistically, in year one, if we just did bare minimum and added 3 different things, we could raise net revenue profits $24,000 in year one. I think that's very low key. I know that we could add a lot more to that. Like I said, we could add different programs to our childcare as well, which could be additional fees. And I just think it's time that we start thinking about creative ways to kind of put money back into this department. And I don't think I'd be doing my job if I didn't advocate to kind of grow and do things that might be outside of the box or not typical to what we do in the town. I think the last thing I'll say is, when I took this job, I was kind of shocked about the things that we oversaw in the conditions of them as far as recreation department. And I'm going to be very, very frank. It was disappointing. The recreation department, the building that we have, although we're very fortunate, it's come a long way in a year and a half, it needs some TLC. And I'm willing to do the work to get it to where it needs to be. We all know about where Beauregard Beach is. It's not in a great state. And then the tennis courts is the third thing that we oversee. And the courts themselves are in great shape, but the facade is crumbling. So as a town, I think we really need to look at different ways to kind of reinvest in this department. And I'm willing to do the legwork. And I've laid out a few different opportunities, but I think, I would like the select board to kind of give the department some guidance and some direction in helping us utilize the fruits of our labor in retained earnings. And what I'm asking for is $20,000 out of retained earnings. In talking to Stacy and Mark specifically on this project, we talked about it's important to have a nice retained earnings as kind of a safety net. And we were thinking that we're going to be in really bad condition going into this fiscal year. But you want to keep between 5 and 10% of your overall budget. So we're at $240,000 in retained earnings. We are at a little bit over 10% of our overall expense budget for FY22. So I think we can be safe and take a little bit of that out in funding a project request like this. So I'm open to questions. I'm willing to go over anything that you might need, but I'm open.
Thank you, Nick. So essentially, you're looking to reinvest some of your retained earnings in something that would grow some revenue.
Yeah, and we've never reinvested our retained earnings. We've only used it to fund deficits or increases in pay.
Okay.
And as a department head, I can't put forth a warrant article. So I'm looking for help with that.
Mike, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Thanks, Nick, for really the thorough presentation here. I think it's really helpful for us to kind of understand how everything works. And, just a reminder that the rec department was disproportionately hit by the pandemic, and because there was really no revenue coming in because kids couldn't be there and programs couldn't really move forward. And one of the reasons that we were excited about hiring you was because your engagement with programming and increasing the offerings that we have. So, we've got to give you the tools to do what we hired you to do. And this to me seems like a no-brainer. To be honest, I wasn't excited about it when I first heard about it a few months back, but I think it's really necessary at this point. If there's a way that the board could, fund some of this a little bit more fully as well, to earmark some of it from our reversions this past year, I would definitely entertain that. My only misgiving with this project is I'm impatient. I think the demand is there now, and we need to start building that revenue base and get kids there. When we have larger projects and we fund design and engineering on the front end, and then we wait till the following year and we fund construction, that's fine. Things are complicated. This seems uncomplicated to me, and I'd rather fund design, engineering, and construction, and move forward sooner than that. So that would be my preference. And again, for a smallish kind of project, for us to have increased construction costs over over another year, it doesn't seem like there's value there. The other piece of it is, we also cut the youth center when we put the addition at McCall, and we promised to have a solution for that we don't have. And I think this is really an opportunity to bring kids of all ages and adults to use it there. I mean, I tell you, I think you had me at pickleball, because that's right around my current level of fitness as far as what I see in the sport court. So it is somewhat, relevant to me. So, why not soak me for a little bit more fees? But I appreciate the thoroughness of this, Nick. And as I said, I'd like to move forward sooner than later if it's the pleasure of the board. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for the presentation. So I understand you're asking to figure out how we can come up with $20,000 for engineering. For total construction, are you looking at around 175,000? Is that what you think it would be?
Yeah, I mean, we're just, by looking at what a comparable project would be, the one in Newbury is a little bit bigger, as I mentioned, and they came in at about 175. They also had to install a retaining wall and also the fence around it as well. So I think it would be very similar to what we want. So I think the total construction cost would be somewhere in the 175, maybe a little bit less, but I think it's safe to say 175.
All right. So to do, usually we try not to, fund engineering without knowing that we're going to be able to build it, right? Because we don't want to spend money and then have the engineering go to waste. So I think I agree with Mike that we would be looking for like 200,000 at fall town meeting to do the engineering and the construction, right? And I think we need to come up with some ideas of where that would be, and it could be 20,000 from return earnings and 180 from a combination of free cash or something else. But we can figure out if if some of I don't want to tie up the future fees to it, because I think the future fees would be useful to grow the program rather than to have to pay for debt on the construction. I think we need to figure it out, but I think we need to put something on the draft of the warrant, so that we have something and we can discuss more what we want to present to town meeting. But I think we should fund the whole thing.
Awesome. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I want to start with this project first, because I know that we can create revenue, which is going to grow our retained earnings, which will allow us to take on the next project. And the goal is to try to be able to get us to a department that can self-fund a lot of these things.
Rich, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mariano and Mike, for your comments. I agree with both of you as well. Nick, thank you for being here, and thank you for all your hard work at the recreation department. Certainly, it's showing. The new booklet that came out for the fall programming was, as robust as I can remember over the last couple of years. So I know it's been hard. It's been a hard road to haul there. And I appreciate, your dedication to your craft and really going to bat for the rec department. I think this is an area, just thinking broadly here, more than Nick's request, that I think we need to, as a town, really start to focus on a bit more. We're really starting to lag behind some of our other communities in the area. And I understand, resources are scarce, but, this is a department that serves, thousands of kids every season. And it certainly not only serves these kids, but it also provides, a vast amount of employment and volunteer opportunities for our older kids as well. So, Nick, I don't know if you have any committee or board that helps you besides you seem to be like a one-man show. I see you at all these meetings by yourself, and no one really advocating on the rec's behalf. It seems like, with 50 committees in this town, that we should have some type of help for you. So I hope this, and I appreciate my colleagues' comments. I hope this begins a dialogue where we can, really start to look at the rec department and see how we can, throw them a lifeline, because I think it's important necessity for not just our youth, but our adults as well. I noticed there's some great adult programming. Even Mike's going to play pickleball if we get this done. So, it's just something we really need to start looking at, because we really are starting to lag behind other communities. And I appreciate you being here, and I would support, what my colleagues suggest as well.
Thanks, Rich.
Well,
just to follow up on what you said, I am one of the very few rec directors that does not have a citizen-led board or rec commission.
And you came from Bedford, right?
Yes.
Nick, is that where you came from?
That was my last rec job. Yes.
Okay. And what was the oversight there?
So
rec department
revolving account, which is every rec director wants a revolving account, which is another story of another day. And it was overseen by a rec commission. The rec commission would approve expenditures.
Interesting. Okay.
Anything over a certain amount. I think it was 50,000. It worked out really well because you have the advocates to help you push things through.
Right. That's what I was thinking. A lot of the youth sports and so forth, you have a set of advocates that are parents or you just have a presence in the community, and you're able to do fundraising and publicity, and it would really it would help you out.
Yeah, and you could divide and conquer certain projects instead of just being like Rich said, a one-man show.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with my colleagues here and you, and that's again, thanks for the thoroughness and for all the legwork that you've done and put into this. Definitely, you have a facility in need of some improvement, and I think this would be a great place to start outdoors.
Thank you very much.
So I guess this becomes, a warrant article. I want, I'm glad you talked with Stacy and Mark, but a little more, sort of a confirmation of the financial considerations here. When we go into town meeting, I know Finance Committee would want to look at this as well, I think. So, but it's a great idea. It's a great start.
Susan, could I ask a quick question?
Yes.
In terms of drafting the article, obviously we don't need the motion for a while. We have some time, but for the funding source, it would be recreation retained earnings or another available fund such as free cash. Those would be the two options that we're considering.
I think so. Anybody else on the board have any thoughts? Me with more experience in putting these things together.
The only other question I had was Nick had mentioned that other account where there's the 20 plus grand sitting in there.
The gift thing.
The gift. I mean, I just think we got to put that money to work. It doesn't do anybody any good sitting there, even if it's used for an additional piece of the project and improvement or something like that. I think that's something to fold in. And town meeting, I think, would appreciate too that there's a little bit contribution from this account.
Okay. Thank you.
Mark, do you need us to vote or?
That would be good, Mariano, if we could vote now or when we get to the warrant, the board's pleasure.
Okay, so I move that we direct the town manager's office to add to the warrant, to the draft warrant, an article to fund the engineering and construction of the recreation department's sport court.
Second.
Roll call vote. Mariano.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Great job, Nick. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's move on to the controller's report. So Stacy can kind of put some background to this, all this, the warrant article and all of the funding decisions.
Sure, good evening. I don't know if Nick wants to stop sharing his screen. I don't know if he left already.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
The ghost of Nick.
No, I'm still here. I'll unshare. Hold on a second.
Thank you.
I don't think I'll be sharing anything, but I know that it can get distracting.
So thanks for waiting, Stacy. Go.
Oh, that's fine. I'm listening. I like to listen, and I do like these Zoom meetings, so I can just sit and listen. So in your packets, I believe there were three things. I won't talk about all three things, but one of them was the FY21 final comptroller report, which had budget to actual information regarding the general fund, enterprise funds, a few of the other special funds that are sort of important and we talk about a lot. I also gave a July FY22 report, which I won't talk much about. It's really just where are we at the end of July? Nothing too exciting. It's the first month of the fiscal year. There really wasn't much to say or report about that. And I also provided a pension actuary funding summary, which was real high level, which we can talk quickly about because the retirement board needs to make a decision about which funding table we want PERAC to go with for our actuary study. So I'll jump right into the FY21 report. At a couple of meetings ago, maybe last meeting, we had a discussion about capital, and I wanted just to make it very clear that when I did the math in my head real quick, I forgot about the general stabilization balance when I did the reserve calculation and came up with 11%, which did seem sort of low based on how we finished the year at previous meetings when I talked about turnbacks and whatnot. So if and when I add that general stabilization piece of the reserves calculation, which is the correct way to do the math, the math is it's more like 14.35%. So it is more than what I had anticipated, or not so much anticipated, but more than I stated at the other meeting. And I told the capital fellas that, I'm sorry, you're right. And there was a lot more. I'd gone back to my numbers and made sure that things made more sense, and this made sense. So we have a little bit over $5 million above the 10%. So who wants some money? No, I'm kidding. I know capital wants some. I know recreation probably deserves some after that discussion. Retirement system might want some, affordable housing might want some. So that's sort of where I'm going with this, is that I think as a board, and as upper management, we should talk about if we do have more than what our reserve policy has in reserves, we should discuss maybe talking about how we want to allocate anything above and beyond what we have in our pocket. So of course, we haven't really looked at our forecasting for FY 23, 24, and 25 yet. So we don't want to give away every single penny we have, but we do want to make sure that we think about what we're going to need in the future to postpone any sort of override. With that said, I did supply you all with a memo. I gave you a bunch of information a couple weeks ago just about how the turnbacks were looking. I moved a few things around between the general fund budget and the CARES Act. We basically didn't charge a lot of the COVID related costs to the general fund budget because the CARES Act had extended their program, went beyond their deadlines, which they had originally pressed on us. So we had raised a bunch of money at fall town meeting last year from free cash to help departments. And we really didn't need it when push came to shove and we finished the year this year. So with that said, we have a $19 million operating reserve, which as a percentage of our total revenues is 14.35%, which is way higher than we would have ever anticipated after a global pandemic. I do appreciate that we were all very conservative when we budgeted 21, and we were all very conservative with our expenditures. In FY20, we had a spending freeze, so that helped our close with 20. FY21, I think we were still all very cautious with, extra overtime. We wanted to keep costs down. Just certain things in certain areas that we were able to control spending, we did what we could. In relation to the general fund revenue, our tax revenue came in just as planned. It's almost as if we didn't really have a global pandemic hitting. Everyone seemed to be paying their bills on time, which was very, very positive for us. Motor vehicle excise sort of rebounded. It's not quite at the level that it was before COVID, but it's certainly much higher than we thought. With the first commitment this year, I was really discouraged because the first commitment came in about $300,000 less than the first commitment last year. So I didn't think we were going to even get close to what we thought we were going to get for motor vehicle. But the second commitment came in a lot higher, which made up the difference, which I'm grateful for. We're still not at the level we were pre-COVID, and we probably won't get there until after 23, but we'll see how that goes. Other areas where we really got a lot more, almost every area of local receipts, we collected more than we budgeted. But again, that was because we had low conservative estimates, just because we were not sure what was going to happen. And, building revenue came in even more than what it had before COVID. So it seems like I think everybody was home mastering their plans and building new things at home during the pandemic. And like I said, with the general fund expenditures a couple weeks ago, one of the last times I was here, just giving you a quick update of how our reversions looked. We're turning back quite a bit. And a lot of it has to do with the 1.3 million-ish that we had raised at fall town meeting, or not raised, we funded with free cash. We're basically turning all that back and more. And there's a list of all the free cash uses in the report. There's reserve fund transfers. As you know, the reserve fund was given an extra $525,000 to help if any department needed any last minute COVID cost coverage. And so they basically didn't really even need all that after all was said and done. And the enterprise funds, we talked a little bit about the recreation finishing at a really good percentage, 16.5%. When you look at their retained earnings as a percentage of their total revenue, they're well above what we had anticipated. We weren't sure how they were going to finish the year. They ended up getting quite a bit back. I know a lot of that has to do with the general fund support. I think in FY21, we gave them $400,000 or so. And in FY20, Two, we've lowered that quite a bit, but it's still more than what we had paid in the past. We do want to support the recreation. They were the hardest hit department with this pandemic, so it's really important that we do support and invest in their activities to keep them afloat. And water sewer, we did know that we were going to have a good year with water sewer because of the rate increases, the service fees, and we had a dry spring, summer, and everybody was home last year using their water. So we knew we were going to have a pretty decent year this year, but I don't think that's going to be the same going forward. We had a really wet spring and summer this year, and people started going back to work. So we'll see how FY22 pans out, but I have a feeling we don't want to use too much of our retained earnings. We don't want to be too hasty at this point. I don't know, let's see, we've got, after the water sewer, we have our revolving funds. These are the chapter 44, section 53E.5 funds where town meeting votes a cap of spending. We've changed, or the Mass General laws changed recently where we have to set up bylaws for these types of funds. And so now we have 6. The latest that we added was the Historical Commission for demolitions. And so this sort of just shows what the activity had been in these funds and what their budget caps are. Revolving fund, we may head in this direction. It's a little bit stricter than having a revolving fund where we set up with special legislation, but I think we'll have this discussion over the next couple months to figure out what direction the rec fund wants to be in. We had a few discussions last spring, and I think with just COVID and some uncertainties, we weren't ready to pull the trigger on making any changes. Then we have stabilization funds. It just shows the ending balances of the general stabilization, the building stabilization, and capital stabilization. And then we have the OPEB fund, which has about $5 million, which is a very small percentage of what the actual OPEB liability is. We'll have a presentation from our OPEB actuary, I think in early October at one of the October meetings. I think it's about $120 million is the liability. So we have quite a bit to catch up with that, but that will roll into sort of our pension discussion in a minute. I know that was kind of quick. I know you have a busy night, so I didn't know if you had any questions about any of this information.
I think Mariano has one.
Yeah, Stacy, thank you very much for all the information, including the memo. I have a question. The 1.2, 1.3 million, 1.29, whatever, the number for COVID that was appropriated from free cash last fall, has that already reverted back? And that's part of the 14.35%? Or is that additional? Okay, so that's already counted in the 14.35%?
Yep, anything that wasn't spent is included in that 14 million. I mean, the 14.3% and the 14 undesignated fund balance.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep. And the DOR is coming out. I mean, they were supposed to come out last week. We had some COVID issues, and so they had to postpone their visit, but he'll come out. I think we're going to try to meet on Monday, but we're trying to get everything uploaded and ready to go so that we have free cash certified. This isn't free cash. This is your operating reserve. We can only appropriate the free cash piece of the reserve, which is probably going to be about 13 million of that 19 million. Of course, we can always appropriate the general stabilization with the 2/3 vote at town meeting, but we tend to just focus on the free cash piece, which is about 13 million.
Well, I hope we don't appropriate 13 million of free cash.
Me too.
Mike.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Stacy, for that update. It's good news and really a reflection of the dedication of our departments running very lean over the past couple of years and staying committed to that. I know that wasn't easy. So it's good to see. I think that we've got to spend a little of this money on capital projects because it's typically what we do in this situation, but there's a cost to us deferring capital projects as well. So the sooner that we get to some of our long backlog of projects on the capital side, I think that the better use of that money. But my concern is we haven't really done the forecasting yet, and we have to negotiate with 6 bargaining units this year, the schools being one of them. And, so it may seem like we've got a lot in the bank now, but I don't want to build up too much of a fiscal cliff in the out years. And looking at the Lynch project, you know, we're going to be hitting residents with a lot already. So the longer we can push off an operating override, the better. So once we start getting into the forecasting, then I think I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. But certainly in the near term, I think we can peel a little bit off for some of these capital projects.
Rich, do you have any thoughts or questions?
I do. Thank you, Stacy. Thanks, Mike, for your comments. I agree. I guess being the new person on the block, I guess I can ask this question. And I guess this is, you know, for any staff member that's on here now. You know, I guess my question, you know, this is my first time going around in this process. Is the controlled spending sustainable, or is that just a product of COVID and everyone, you know, sharpening their pencils?
Sorry, I got a little bit disconnected there. Did you ask if it was sustainable? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, is the controlled spending sustainable, or is that just, you know, a byproduct of COVID and everyone sharpening their pencils and doing what they need to do to be lean, or is it something that we can maintain?
I think it's a little bit of a one-timer where as we had been going through each fiscal year, and up until we did the override, we were budgeting tighter and tighter and turning back less and less. I mean, we've never turned back less than really $1 million when you talk about surplus revenues plus expenditure turn back. So I do believe this is a bit of an anomaly because we did budget so conservatively and we did really try not to spend if we didn't have to. I don't think we're going to be looking at with turnbacks of that much money in FY22 or 23, to be fair.
Thank you.
Well, I just, you know, I would echo Mike's point about where, you know, it's certainly good news to hear that we have a very healthy reserve position or reserves. Yet we're very early in the process of looking at forecasting and understanding what's ahead, you know, 2 years, 3 years, and also this year coming up. So, you know, I agree that it would be prudent and make sense to use some of this for some capital projects rather than delaying those. But you know, it's as it always is. It's a kind of a balance. You know, how do you, you know, where do you draw the lines here? And I think we need a little, you know, some further study on that. But really, thank you for, I mean, setting this out so clearly for us. Okay.
You head into the pension discussion real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Hit us with the pension discussion.
Okay.
Some action from us. Yes.
So what normally happens is PARAC does an actuarial study every 2 years of the pension system, and across all the 99 systems in Massachusetts, everyone seems to have a different actuary cycle, different discount rates, different funding terms. So it's really difficult to compare us to others, but we try to just look at, in our sense, how much are we funded? And based on, I believe you all received just a summary analysis that showed, I'm just pulling it up to make sure I have it, that showed where we were last actuary and where we are today. And based on the study, using a discount rate of 6.75, we have a discount rate of 7. As you lower the discount rate, our liability increases because the actuary is saying that we cannot rely on interest earnings of 7% over the life of the liability. They want us to rely and be more conservative on a lower percentage. So as our liability changes over time due to retirements, due to raises, due to mortality tables, due to all sorts of different factors, we're looking at a funding table that we've tried and really tried to commit to sticking with the 2029 funding. That's not long away from now. So any major increase or flux is going to hurt a little harder because our table is so much smaller and it's not spread to 2040 like some others are. So what this really comes down to is looking at, based on what the actuary results were, we're 83% funded when he uses a 6.75% discount rate. And 83% is right up there at the top. We would be within the top maybe 10 systems that have similar, not even similar structure, 10 systems that are up there. We've got one system that's fully funded, which is like Massport, which they have their own little tiny system. A couple other systems are getting close, but we're really right up there with the other systems and really show that we've committed to getting this funded. And so we can work on our next long-term liability, the OPEB liability. So as we discuss our long-term liabilities, this is the first one that's the most important because it's actually required that we fund it. Whereas OPEB isn't quite required yet, so we sort of put that on the back burner like everybody else and fund what we can. So the idea is to commit to funding this pension liability and keep the 2029 date while also keeping it affordable. So here's where the problem lies. If our liability grew, I think our total actuarial liability grew about $14 million, and our net, because our assets went up too, our net liability is $28 million right now today. So we have to fund that over the next however many years we want to fund it. Now we could extend it to 2040 and pay, a 2% increase every year in the actuary, or we can commit to the 2029 date and pay 10% of growth between now and 2029. Now, I know 10% is not really the target percentage. We want it to grow 2.5% so we can stay within our Prop 2.5 limits. But if we want to commit to this, we're looking at a 10% growth at the 6.75 percentage rate. It's going to be another $100,000 than what we had budgeted and forecasted last year. So it's really a question of, do we want to commit to the 2029 funding table? Do we want to push out the funding table? Do we want to leave our discount rate at 7%? Because not everybody else is at 7% yet. Not that we need to be or want to be like everybody else. We do want to be, we want to be the leaders here and have our pension funded. But if not everybody else is going down to 7 and we're trying to compare and see how we look, do we want to drop it down to 6.75? So there's a couple of options on the table, and what I usually do is talk to the select board. I'm talking to FinCom tomorrow night about what can we afford? What is the maximum increase each year in the pension funding that we can actually stomach? And if we were to go with the Parax Dream Actuary funding table, we would go to 6.75 and have it funded by 2029. And to me, on the retirement board, we want to fund it as soon as possible, and that's what I would want our retirement board to vote. But I know that we have financial constraints, so can we afford a 10% increase over the next couple of years in our retirement allocation? Or do we want to extend the table and keep it a little bit more affordable, which is still around the 7.75% that we had increased in the past couple of years? So I don't know if the board had a chance to look at the funding tables, consider some of I think there were 3 options in there, and think about what we can and can't afford, if you have any ideas or questions about it. I know it's sort of a lot and it's kind of complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it's good that we are among the communities that are in better shape. And it would be nice to stay there.
It's really a matter of funding 6.4 million in FY23 or 6.3 million in FY23. If we
what do we do? What have we done the past couple of years?
With our last actuary, our funding table, we committed to the 2029 and bumped the increase to 7.75%. So we're paying 7.75% more every year until we get our next actuary, which is done every 2 years. So we would be committing to this increase for 2 years, and then we see what happens with the actuary and our assets and our liabilities the next 2 years. So in this instance, the comparison is, if we stuck with where we're at, we would be paying 6.3 versus 6.4 if we drop down our discount rate and we kept the table where it's at. Because the other 2 options,
But are all three alternatives in the spreadsheet, are they all dropping the discount rate to 6.75?
There's two that drop it to 6.75. So the very first worksheet is the summary. The second worksheet, I think our actuary might have labeled this one a little bit wrong. The first worksheet drops the discount rate to 6.75 and it keeps the funding to 2029. So we don't extend the table, we don't push our liability out any later than what it's been the last, I don't know, 5-6 years.
Right. That's a 10.4% increase per year.
Exactly. And the next tab in the worksheet was 6.75, the drop in the discount rate, but it extends the table to 2031. So it bumps it out 2 years.
And that's 7.75% per year.
Yeah, actually it might bump it out it bumps it out 2 years, but the second year, the 2030 is like kind of a half of a payment. Yeah. It's not a big payment. And then the last option is leaving the discount rate at 7.5%, I'm sorry, it's 7%, leaving the funding table basically as is, and it's the 7.70%.
Right, so that's what we've been working on so far. The third one doesn't change anything.
Roughly, yeah. It changed slightly, but it was 7.75%, but now it's 7.7, so it's a little bit.
And that's only because the assets did better than the 7% discount rate, right?
Basically, yeah. And I mean, I was very, very excited about this year because I just thought that our assets were like going through the roof, but I always forget about this smoothing method that anytime we have a loss or anytime we have a gain, it gets smoothed over a certain period. So we don't get the full gain. And that's why there's a difference between, like, I think in the summary, it says the market funding versus the actuarial funding. And the market funding is higher than the actuarial funding for that reason. They're giving us credit for the full gains from last year in the market analysis, which would be 93% funded. But because of the smoothing effect, which really helps us in bad years, we want to take that on. But in good years, we have to wait to get the full gains.
That means we're carrying some good performance into future years in case something happens in the market.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Okay. It's sort of leveraging the risk a little bit, or mitigating the risk. I don't know, whatever the word is. So the idea is to find out, and so I can report back to the retirement board, because it's ultimately the retirement board's decision, but we obviously want to know what we can afford from the select board's perspective, town management's perspective, FinCom's perspective. I'll be discussing this with them tomorrow night, to see if there is any, I don't want to use the appetite to actually keep the funding table and bump it up that $100,000. It's $100,000 in FY23, but it's $300,000 in FY24, and it's $600,000 in FY25. So it does have a compounding effect. So it's not just $100,000 1 year. But it does change every 2 years. We get a new actuary, so we can always sort of reevaluate it if the 10 is too much. We could also use some of that free cash to pump into the funding table and help that situation too, going from one reserve to another, but that's another option.
My view, I think 10% is, I would love to be able to fund it at the 6.75 discount rate by 2029. We have a lot of different, we have a lot of competing priorities, right? And increasing at 10.4% per year for the next 7 years or 6 years, 6.5 years. Yeah. It will constrain other departments, right? And other services that residents expect. And we are already one of the best funded from a retirement, contributory retirement. We are in the top 10. I think you said of all systems.
For actual funding, yeah, we're up there.
Yeah,
we're in the, it's hard to tell because there's some that have their actuary done, but I don't have their new numbers. There's people that are in 19 versus 20 versus 21.
Even if we're top 20 out of 350 something, right?
Yeah, pushing the funding out will drop that percentage.
and you know, in other departments, right? We hear the recreation department is it's not funded very well, right? We don't have anywhere near top 50% of the services that other towns have as far as recreation. And I mean, I would love to be able to fully fund it by 2029 at the discount at the 6.75%, but I think we've been going at 7.7% increase every year, and that was going to be painful enough. So my feedback would be, let's leave it at 7. Let's figure out if we can continue to fund at 7.7%, or if we need to push out one more year to 2030. I would rather not do that, but at the same time, it's tough to go ask for an operating override in 2 or 3 years because we want to fund it before 90% of other towns in Massachusetts, right? So that's my feedback. So I wouldn't increase it right now.
You wouldn't increase to the 10.4. You'd try to either do the reduced discount rate to 6.75 and push it out a year, or leave it at 7 and leave it alone.
Yeah.
Either one of those. Okay.
Yeah, it sounded like the more ambitious approach, the 10% was just maybe not for us. A little too much. Okay.
Yep, they probably will feel the same way, and I'll let the retirement board know. Thank you so much.
Mike has his hand up.
Oh,
I see Mike. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, just a general comment. I'm just kind of curious what FinCom has to say to, you know, I know they've been doing a lot of work on the OPEB and retirement savings. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're kind of moving along on a parallel track with their plan. So that will kind of give us an idea. But otherwise, I kind of agree there. You know, I look at it as I'd love to have a 15-year mortgage right now, but you know, it's doesn't seem like it's in the cards. So you know,
I think they feel the same way, because even with the 7.75 increase, they were sort of hurting with that. So I don't think that they would want to go with the 10.4. So I totally understand.
Okay.
And I will
Great. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. So that brings us to finally to the transfer station. And I think I see
Madam Chairman?
go ahead.
Hello?
Can hear you, Jake.
Okay. We're trying, I know you guys want to see me, so I'm trying to get my face on the TV here.
We can see you too.
See you.
That's okay, Jay. Don't try too hard.
Okay. All right. I'll just start. Madam Chairman, here with Leanne McGann, the business manager, and Nick Polly, the facility coordinator at the transfer station. Once again, I want to thank this board for backing us on this wonderful project at the transfer station. I truly believe it's an asset to the to the town of Winchester and all the residents and the commercial haulers that use our facility. We were asked to do a task to try to find between $450,000 and $500,000 worth of debt payments per year to cover the debt. I'm sorry. We have done that. I know you have a copy of our memo. We have 2 options out there. If you want to go through it, we can. So one option, I'll start off, would be eliminate. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, please. Yeah.
Okay. The first option would be the SMART program, that we would eliminate that entirely with a $40 permit increase for all households. And that would be a total of a year $310. The second option would be to keep the status quo with SMART as an option result in an increase of $64 a permit increase per household. In the back page, we do have debt service and how we came to that. Staff's recommendation is to go with option one. The reason for that is for a few reasons. The first is that if we have everyone who's on SMART to go on to the sticker, we will increase revenue about $248,000 automatically by just doing that. We started the SMART program, and believe it or not, it's still a pilot program after 8 years. We're still trying to work out the kinks, I guess, but we feel at this time, with all the construction that we're going to be doing and all the improvements, that the efficiency of their operation would be better if we postpone the SMART pilot program for future years until we get the transfer station back after construction. And then later on in years, if you wanted to go full SMART, you could, or stay the status quo as we want to do on option one. So after that, I would like to pass it on. I know you have a memo from Mark Toogood when it talks about the payments and the financing. We're here to answer any questions.
So, Susan, would you like me to take you through the financing memo? Would that?
Yep, that would make sense.
Okay. Does everyone have a copy of the memo I distributed? I didn't distribute it until yesterday. First of all, I want to apologize for that. But what I was asked to do is to just identify what the debt service payments would be on this project. Obviously we have to make some assumptions still at this point. We're assuming a project cost of $6.5 million for the project, which is the number I believe Weston & Sampson has provided us with. At the last meeting, the board had discussed the option of putting $1 million of free cash towards the project, which would obviously lower the borrowing authorization from 6.5 down to 5.5. Assuming that we issued a ban for the for next spring, which is when we would be putting it out to bid, for 12 months, we would only have a ban interest payment due the first year, which would be fiscal 23. And the advantage of issuing the ban, which we do on a lot of projects, is this particular project has $1 million contingency approximately, is that we wouldn't actually issue the bonds until the final project cost is known. So obviously we're hoping that it'll come in less than the 6.5. Hopefully it'll come in without having to use any of the contingency money, which is unlikely, but then we would be issuing bonds for the actual amount. Now, I did 2 scenarios, for the board's discussion here. The first one assumes that we have to pay for the full $5.5 million over a 10-year period, which is the amount that is allowed under the statute being the one that covers transfer station facility upgrades. As you can see, depending if we go level debt or equal principal, that those payments are somewhere in 24, that is when the full amount kicks in, is about $700,000 or $750 if you did equal principal. Now, if you go to scenario 2, which is what we've been kind of working with bond counsel on and DEP, is if they allow us to take the $1.8 million, which is $1.8 million of the $6.5 million project cost, which is environmental remediation, and amortize it over 30 years. And then the project, the facility upgrade component of it would still be over 10 years, which would be $3.7 million. So you can see by applying that, you can see the payments, assuming we go level debt, which would probably be the way to go in this particular case, since you have the payments are more, in line from one year to the next. There's not a lot of variation. You can see it's about $570,000 for your P&I payments for the first few years. And then obviously it drops way down once the facility upgrade component of it drops off, and then basically you're just paying for the environmental remediation piece for the next 20 years. So that's the reason the schedule goes out for 30 years. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that before we kind of get back to Jay's part of it on the fees. Happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I don't really have any other than when will you know which scenario we can do?
Well, we have we may have a meeting. We're trying to get a meeting with DEP for Thursday with bond counsel, and it looks promising at this point that they're going to allow us to separate the two. So it would probably most likely be scenario 2, but I'm hoping that we'd know that certainly in the next couple of weeks. Is what I'm hoping for. DEP it's a little slow going, in terms of getting responses, anything definitive back from them. But Jay Gonzalez has been extremely helpful and has worked, kind of with us hand in hand to kind of get through this issue. This is one of the very few borrowings that actually requires DEP to sign off on the project before we're actually allowed to issue the bonds for the project. So this is DEP has to be involved, and ultimately we're looking for a sign-off letter, on 100% design. So,
thank you very much, Mark. Yeah. Mike, I see your hand is raised.
Thanks, Susan, and thanks, Mark and Jay and Nick. So, just to go back a little bit to the discussion of the revenue at the transfer station relative to the SMART program. While I'm certainly have been a long-time supporter of the program, financially it's just not working anymore because of the market conditions. So while I think that we need to kind of address that, and so I appreciate the recommendation to eliminate it completely. I do think that we have to balance that with some of the program is I think attractive to residents from a use perspective, and if they're low income and don't want a full permit or don't really need it. So I think if we do eliminate the SMART program, I think we need to balance that with a some other program that allows a lower cost for low income families, seniors, and lower use. So that would be my only perspective. And I think that kind of maybe affects the revenue projections a little bit, but something I'd like to see too.
I'll have Nick speak on behalf of that.
We do have a low income sticker right now, run through the Board of Health. It's a $30 sticker for the year.
And
yeah,
we also went. Go ahead. Sorry.
My point is more that I think that some people use the SMART permit as kind of a way to balance that as well. So if we're, I think a lot of people are into the policy objective of the SMART program, but I think some people it's an economic decision as well, even though they might not be applying for a low income permit.
Gotcha.
So I've been using the SMART program for several years. Nick, I've bought bags from you at the transfer station a few times. And I think, when we established it, we had a good goal. And at the time we were getting paid for recyclables and we were paying for trash. So it made sense to give free recycling and to charge for solid waste use. But the reality is the economics have changed. We now know that the majority of what goes in the recycling bin is not recyclable. The majority of plastics that are going in cannot be recycled, and that's why we're paying almost the same for our single stream recycling than we're paying for solid waste, or we're about to. And the state of California is now considering mandating that plastic manufacturers stop putting recycling symbols on some of the plastic because it's no longer recyclable.
That's a dirty little industry secret. Those are resin identifiers that look a lot like recycling symbols.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know, while I can appreciate, I also can appreciate Mike's point about, you know, folks who use the SMART program instead of applying for a low income permit. I'd like to see if we can also, as part of this capital investment, figure out a way that we can reduce our recycling costs, whether we can separate the recycling that we actually get paid for, right? I believe corrugated cardboard is still something that we would get paid for, and possibly, I don't know if glass or aluminum. I'll take your lead on that, Nick and Jay.
The good news with the Weston Sampson plan the select board has chosen to move forward with, it does give us the flexibility with the compactors lined up next to each other, that if we wanted to separate out the recycling, we do have that flexibility. If we wanted a dedicated compactor to recycling, mixed plastics, metals, we can do that.
Yeah, so I think, you know, we could, if we could get some cost reductions, right, then we don't need to get as much additional revenue, right, from that standpoint.
Good point.
But otherwise, I agree. I think we need to remove SMART and see if there are any grants available that we can look at, either you know, a whole pay as you throw, or separating recyclables, or whatever it is that we can do to reduce the amount of solid waste and remove and reduce some costs. So that's my feedback on it.
It's also worth noting that the transfer station improvements that we're doing do not preclude us from doing a full SMART or a full pay-as-you-throw program in the future.
Right, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess.
So what do you, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry, Rich.
So I agree with Mariano and Mike's comments as well. You know, it'd be great if we could at some point look at that low income sticker and the qualifications that we require, if we can, for that. But I agree. My fear is if we raise the prices of the regular stickers too much, then people will jump to the SMART program, and that will hurt any revenue that we're projecting. So I think this is the right route to go.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's if it's no longer financially justified to have the SMART program, you know, that's not our fault, really. That's just the you know, conditions changed, and I would like to move more towards, you know, basing the fee on use, which would or you know, pay as you throw, that principle. But you know, we need to design that. We need to do the work at the transfer station too. So I'd be inclined to go along with what staff recommends as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I think something to note is when we do this, that we're careful to notify the public and explain what we're doing, explain why the price is going up, that it's to pay for the capital improvements. Maybe in whatever notices that go out with the bills or whatever you normally do to notify the residents of these things.
Yeah, we'll do all that. And also I'll give Mike Bencourt's telephone cell number.
Right, okay.
So Susan.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
I was gonna ask you when we need to vote on this, and or what we need to do tonight. So go ahead.
So if it's okay, if I could just ask Jay, sorry. But Jay, is the plan to bring this back possibly to the next meeting with the specific proposed rate for January of 22?
Right.
Is that correct? That you
That's correct. Yeah.
Back a recommendation, and then the other part of this, since the debt service kicks in FY23, Stacy and I went over this earlier today, is that there'd be a recommendation to cover the debt service that would actually be in the January 23 rate increase. I know it's kind of confusing. There's two different things kind of going on here. One is the increase that would have for January of 22. And then if we want to build in the revenue for fiscal 23, what Stacy and I kind of came up with, Stacy, correct me if I'm wrong, but that we would want probably a board vote before the town manager's budget is finalized in February of 22. Is that correct?
Yes, because if we're going to plan on using that revenue to balance the budget, it should be something that's been voted by the select board to do so. And it wouldn't take effect until July. You would, in your vote, say if you didn't want it effective until FY23, you'd vote in January to say effective July 1, 2022.
Okay.
And then the next increase for the debt service would be effective July 1, 2023 and hit the bills in January of 24.
Correct. Yep.
When would the first band payment, when would the $110,000 band payment be due?
In fiscal 23. So that's what makes this a little bit different, Mariano, is that, you know, we're dealing with the January 22 rate, which is what Jay's talking about with the SMART program, but then we're talking about the debt service in 23. So what Stacy and I kind of came up with was having this other vote that would actually be part of the town manager's budget book when it goes out in February. So that way it's a complete package with revenue that will offset the debt service. So.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
A little different.
And whenever we add it, I want to make sure that the when the sticker renewal goes out by the town clerk, that it's broken out into, you know, this is the cost, you know, $270.
Operating cost.
And then, yeah, operating cost, and then capital improvement plan of $40, right? That way residents understand that it's that, and also that way future select boards will remember to remove it once the once we pay it off.
Yeah, that's right.
Point.
Yeah. So we'd ask to be docketed, Susan, if it's okay, maybe for your next meeting, just so we could kind of wrap this up. So.
Okay.
And is that, Madam Chairman, when you vote on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we need the actual amount calculated to vote on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, on the 27th. All right.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Mark and Stacy and Meg White again. This has been an incredible team working through this. I know that this expense to the town, but I think, like I said, it's an asset to the community. And I'm looking forward to working on this project. Mark wanted me to retire, but now I'm going to stay, Mark. Sorry.
You better, Jay. You better.
Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we do have an item for capital requests, and I know that we got a further memo from capital planning, and the hour was late, and I have stayed tuned. Looks like they have. I'm not sure more there is to discuss. We have taken into account our trying to process the memo they gave us previously, and you know, so we recognize that there is a whole long list of very deserving projects, and I wish we could fund them all. The things that the town needs. And we realize the news on free cash and our financial position is better than we thought at the last meeting. And yet I think we just need to process all of this a little bit and really at least start with forecasting, which we haven't really done, the forecasting. So, you know, if there's anything you want to say, you know, specifically that you would like to do, that the capital is particularly interested in prioritizing with more free cash, you know, we certainly would be interested to hear that. But, you know, you know, I just feel like we need a little more time to process everything before we do anything irrevocable. So,
Susan, may I speak?
Sure.
The capital committee welcomes any comments from the select board, and we welcome them. Please contact us. We want to remind you that we've got our capital stabilization and building stabilization accounts pretty much ranked. And if that $1 million or more is available, would like to know, because we could continue ranking additional items for the capital process. Thank you.
Jimmy, could you share the like the current ranking of the projects and like what's on the bubble? That way we know.
I don't have it in front of me, but we did approve the ambulance this year. And going forward, would like to sit down with the board and the fire chief and develop a plan to partially fund it annually from income, as we talked about. Right now, the last item we had was the McCall circulator system. Roger, do you have that handy?
Yeah.
Let me go.
Yes,
look.
I do.
I mean, I don't think we need to discuss it here. I'd like to see the list, because I know, you know, as we talked with the controller earlier, FinCom is going to be, you know, putting together a 3-year, you know, their 3-year plan, and understanding where we are as far as our reserves and the next operating override and Lynch. And so I don't think I would be ready to make a decision on how much we can allocate tonight, given that we just said $1 million for the transfer station and 200,000 for the rec department. But I'd like to be able to see the spreadsheet on my own. That way at the next meeting, I think, you know, I could have not an intelligent comment, but maybe a more informed comment.
So, Patty, if you could email that out to the board members so everyone has a copy of the file. I'll only take, if it's okay, Susan, just 3 seconds here, just to explain basically as it stands right now, and this could still change at the next capital meeting, is right through the Lincoln School site work is done, and there'll be some portion of the McCall control conversion that'll be funded, which is right below the red line. But that's something that's still being discussed with the school department in terms of funding that in another way instead of using stabilization funds. But basically that shows the projects, Mariano, down to the red line, and it might go down to McCall control conversion, some portion of that project. And then if you go down quickly to capital stabilization fund, Patty, if you don't mind scrolling down, it goes down to the operations manager's vehicle. As you can see, the red line, but we are looking at account closeouts where we might be able to make a couple changes, maybe a couple additional projects. That's going to be discussed Wednesday night. But just to give you a quick overview, Mariano, kind of where we are. So.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to help you sleep well tonight. The things that we're looking at right there are not necessarily reflective of what we would think about doing with it if you gave us some additional money, because we have $5.35 million in schools or school-related projects over the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years. We have an additional $3 million that are town-related projects between Town Hall and DPW. And those are, you know, we may need to move that around between capital and buildings. So there's just, I know you guys have really tough decisions to make, but none of us are sleeping well at night.
like I say, as much money as you could spare and allocate, it will greatly used and will benefit the town of Winchester and maintain our assets into the future.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
We hear you. And I am interested in hearing more from the school department's idea of using some, I forget the acronym, but some federal money for the fall. If ESSER, yeah, if that's, I mean, if that's possible, I don't see why we would not want to do that. I don't know if I don't know if they'll know by Wednesday, but you know, using that money before taxpayer money is better, right?
That wasn't in the 5.3 million, by the way.
Pardon me?
That wasn't in the 5.3 million that I was counting.
I know. I get it.
FYI, if anybody's interested, I did, along with Roger, attend the school committee's presentation of the carriage house. And I saw you there, Susan.
Yeah, I saw part of it. Yep.
And that's somewhere between a $5 and $6 million project.
Yeah.
Fully funded. With, I believe they were using an 8% annual increase for inflation.
For inflation, yeah. Or I forget what you call it. Escalation, yeah. Yeah, I was there for part of that, and they, you know, they're going to talk about that tomorrow, I think. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And good evening, everybody.
Yes. And that brings us to the also long item of the draft warrant article.
Oh, okay.
And thank you for putting together this list. It's you know, it's so important for the board to be able to just read it and understand what everything is, and you know what's a you know, just your typical standard items that we, you know, always do in the fall, and what, you know, the other things are.
Yeah, I think the summary has worked out well. It's the second town meeting where we've kind of laid it out this way. I tried to just show the standard articles, which I think everyone's used to seeing, and I'm happy to answer any questions if any board members have any questions about the standard articles. And then I can just kind of work our way towards the placeholder list, which is probably where we want to spend most of our time, I'm assuming.
Right.
You want me to jump ahead to the placeholder list, or what?
Does anybody have any questions on any of the things listed under standard articles? I do have a question about the Waterfield and Church intersection one. The Transportation Network Reserved Fund allocation. If you could just refresh my memory what that is.
Yeah, I'm glad Stacy is still on the call here. You know, the last couple of years, Stacy, we've received funding, and what was it last year? Was it around $10,000? I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, it's a way that the state's paying communities for Lyft and Uber rides. So it's like a charge per ride that the community's getting when people get picked up and or dropped off, I believe, in Winchester. So we get a piece and we have to use it for specific transportation, traffic, parking related items. Okay. We didn't get much last year because there wasn't a lot of people traveling, but we want to appropriate it. We have to appropriate it at town meeting to spend it. So I'm sure there's plenty of.
This particular project, we just opened bids recently, like in the last week, and the numbers are extremely tight. So even though it's only maybe 10 or 11,000, we thought it was a good use of the funds to put it towards that, so that we have a little more wiggle room. So,
okay, so it's state funding coming in, a small amount of it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I don't even think it's that much, Mark. I think this year was only like $5,000, but anything will help.
Don't tell me that. Geez.
I know, sorry.
Okay.
All right, so anything else, anybody? Okay, so why don't we go to the placeholders?
Okay. So the first one, you know, is the Eversource money. As you know, we have to appropriate the funds for the engineering services, and then we're reimbursed for all of those amounts. And this is for the 115 as well as the 345 line. This will probably going to do two motions, Stacy, on this one for each of those agreements. I think is what we had talked about. So.
Okay.
It's complicated enough to know all this Eversource money. I would keep it separate.
Yep. Okay.
So the second one is part of the 345 MOU. There was a requirement that Eversource make a payment of it was a total of $200,000 for traffic mitigation, but it was paid at different phases of the project. So I think to date we've only received maybe around $10,000, I believe. So the idea is as the money comes in, it'll probably go over 2 or 3 town meetings, is that we would basically, capture that money that has been paid by Eversource and put it aside for this project, a traffic mitigation project.
Okay.
In this particular case, it has to be used for traffic calming within the cross street corridor. I listed the language in the article there so everyone could kind of see how we have to expend the funds. So,
yeah.
Board of Health asked that a placeholder be put on for COVID-related expenses. We don't have any real specifics on this. Stacy and I just got the request from Jen Murphy that the Health Department had asked for that. So,
okay.
For River Street 40B project, they have a requirement before the building department permit is issued to make a traffic mitigation payment. I believe that was 200 and somewhat. Stacy, do you remember the exact amount? Was it 200 or was it 2?
I don't remember, but Beth probably does.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I can pull it up if you need it.
Yeah, I think it's, Beth, I think it's 200. I just found the agreement. I think it's, oh no, wait a minute.
So what does that article do?
So what this would do is the money that we've received to date, which is about 10,000 of the total amount that's due, which I can't find the amount right now, but it would allow us to put that aside basically for a traffic mitigation project, Mariano. We're kind of capturing it as the money's paid. We have to appropriate it.
Okay, so why does it say raise and appropriate?
Stacy, do you want to cover the raise and appropriate part? Or?
Yeah, well, it should say raise and appropriate. I don't have the article. Is it just a placeholder or does it say?
It's a placeholder, but we have raise and appropriate or use available funds. So we, Nina had suggested it be written both ways, so it would allow us to raise and appropriate if the recap wasn't, finalized.
Yeah, we would raise and appropriate it if we had the money before we did the tax recap, and we do it at the fall town meeting. So if this is going to be money that came in and we have it in our hands before fall town meeting, we can raise and appropriate. If it's something that we're not going to have by fall town meeting, we would do a free cash vote to then use it to spend it before we even have it.
Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Knowing that free cash will be replenished because it's a miscellaneous revenue that we're not going to be able to budget unless we have it in our hands.
So Stacy, as of right now, the motion would be for the amount actually received to date, the 10,000 for the, okay.
Are we talking about Eversource or the 40B?
Yeah, the 10,000 is the Eversource, but the 40B is the 200 something thousand.
Yeah, so there's 2 payments associated with 40B at the building permit phase. There's more when we get to the CO phase, but at the building permit, there's 275,000 for traffic improvements on River Street and Cross Street, and then there's like 21,000 for sewer impacts.
So on 4, Beth, the amount from the ZBA decision is 275.
275 for the traffic, and then let me pull this up one more time. 20,965 for the sewer mitigation work.
We would want 2 motions for that, Mark. We would want the traffic piece that would go, it would be separate from the water and sewer piece, because the water and sewer piece will be water and sewer rates. So this would be part of their revenue.
That'll work. 2 motions, yeah.
We have to have it in our hands.
Yeah, so I think we're likely to have the building permit issued before fall town meeting.
Yeah, what's interesting is the demolition permit, I checked with the building department, has already been issued on this.
Okay.
The building permit application, I guess, was filed, but the permit hasn't been issued. So anyway, sorry, everyone. I know we're kind of figuring this out as we go through it.
Okay. Waterfield parking lot, we know that's, we have to renegotiate with.
TBD next to that one. The next one, the sustainability fee, was one that Mike had talked to me about. I think he was interested in putting it back on from last spring. Mike, I don't know if.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a good time last time, so I think it's makes sense to revisit. So, but you know, Mark, I think that we've seen some revenue from the fee that the select board voted on with the building department as well. I forget where we are with that.
We increased the building department revenue, which is a general fund receipt, obviously, is from $15 per thousand to $16 per thousand. So definitely, you know, July 1, the building department rates did go up to that $16. We are getting additional revenue, you know, for fiscal 22, but it is general fund revenue. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that we see that policy-wise, it works. You know, even when we look at the permits pulled for the River Street project, you know, that are, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range, right? So we're able to capture some of that money to, you know, really invest in the sustainability, really the kind of overall efforts, not just the director position that we added, but so it makes sense for us to revisit this, because really what it does is it earmarks that money that we're generating and that revenue that we're generating specifically for the sustainability efforts. So it's fine, I think, the way that it is, but I think it would be better if that money was earmarked.
So I think Nina already had the language pretty much, Mike, right, on this, unless we're gonna make tweaks to it or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, and you know, I just put it on there as a placeholder. I mean, certainly the pleasure of the board to move it forward.
Okay.
Okay.
So the next one was outdoor dining. Mariano had mentioned this to me, and we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with town council to go over kind of the specifics of it. I have Jen Caffarella participating in it, who is very involved in all of that, and hopefully we'll be able to draft an article for that, outside dining.
Yeah, I've gotten more feedback from residents about, you know, outdoor dining and how much they love to now. They are going so much more to the town center because of the outdoor dining, and I know it's operating under emergency orders of the governor right now. But once those go away, I think we want to figure out how we can keep that and keep the vitality that it's bringing to the town center.
So
I think too, you know, Mariana, one of the things, you know, that I've received a lot of feedback is trying to really stabilize the outdoor dining process a little bit, and even the aesthetics of it. But it may be that when we are moving away from the COVID restrictions, although there aren't any really in place now, that we can kind of shrink those spaces to allow for you know, more parking spaces to be open. So definitely the outdoor dining has been a home run, but I think that we've also heard that it's really there's a lot of space taken up, and maybe we can do something to kind of push those you know, kind of truncate the space a little bit more that's being used for outdoor dining.
The next one was one the chair provided me with, the Northeast Metro Tech Building Project.
Yeah, I think it probably is an authorization, a debt authorization. When I went back and looked at all the handouts that I got, I went to their, they had a meeting at the school, but we ended up having it outside because the school was closed. The building there was a dangerous condition in the building. So, you know, it really wasn't clear who was presenting everything, but this is, they have a very old building from like 1968, and their enrollment is going up, and they need to build a new and bigger building, and it's tremendously expensive. But this is the regional. It's a regional district, and there are like 11 districts in it, 11 towns and municipalities. We have actually the smallest enrollment of any of the towns. So our piece of financing that very big building project is not a large one, but they've done a lot of work to get a very high reimbursement rate from the MSBA, which they are pretty sure will expire at the end of this year. So they are in a hurry to have people approve it. And it would, if everybody goes along with approving and authorizing this funding to get the lower rate, it reduces the cost impact on all of the municipalities. So that's why it's here. We don't have to have a referendum. It's just a town meeting approval for this purpose, as I understand it. And I wanted Mina to double check on that, but that's why it's on the town meeting warrant.
So the next one, the non-citizen residents voting in Winchester local elections, I believe was one that was on last time, and it got pulled, I believe.
I'm not sure. I know we talked about it back in February, and then a lot of things changed. That they're still interested in doing this. I guess a number of towns have already tried to get this through. You need the legislature to approve it as well. This would let non-citizen residents vote, but just in local elections, not in any other state or national election. And I have more information on it. I can give it to you for tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one, we don't think we need this, but Mina and I just put it on as a placeholder on whether any town meeting action is required on the control of the town forest, which I believe the board voted either at your last meeting or 2 meetings ago. So that's just a question that we need to kind of get an answer to on our end, whether an article is required. And then the 11th placeholder we just added this evening is the sports court that we're going to put on the list now. So that's what we have so far. The warrant officially closes Friday of this week. So there's always a chance something else could come in, either from a board or citizens petition. So that's what we have so far.
So it's how many? 30 something?
Yeah, probably about 30.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we can discuss it. Maybe some of these can wait.
If I could, Susan, just mention one other thing. I don't want to speak for Beth. One of the projects that Beth had put forward was looking for, I believe it was $50,000 for the what was called Project 2, which was the channel widening project. And it was, she went to capital planning, and capital basically made a determination that it was not a capital project that fit their definition anyway. And it was money to have, I believe, some engineering work as well as permitting. None of the actual work was included, I don't believe, as part of that 50, but that was an important request that Beth had put forward in order to maintain that project that we spent millions of dollars on, and it ended up getting kind of kicked out, as I said, because it didn't fit the definition. So one of the things that Beth and I have talked about is whether, the board would consider, possibly an article, to fund this. This is something that really needs to be done, or the other option is to put it in the operating budget, as an operating expense. But it was something we wanted to mention to the board anyway. So
yeah, so the specific, there's actually two of the flood mitigation projects we're looking to do some maintenance on. So the project 2 area downstream of Waterfield Road, there's significant vegetation growth in the bank and area on the Mississippi Parkway side. And those trees will ruin our mechanically stabilized earth structure that we have in there. So it's important that we have that removed. So as Mark said, it's just the permitting for that. And then the second piece is kind of a large sediment island that's developed downstream of the Cross Street culvert that's impacting the flows there that we'd like to have removed.
Beth, is that the sediment that's, visible from Main Street, or is that something different?
No, this is for just downstream of Cross Street culvert. It's actually pretty hard to see because there's kind of significant overgrowth, but that the culvert, so the road, the main part of the road goes straight. The culvert was designed to go at a kind of an angle around on the east side of the bridge. And if you're using the bike path and you go across on the sidewalk there and you kind of look downstream, you can see there's a large island of sediment that's developed downstream of the culvert.
Yeah, I can't picture it. I need a map.
It's very hard to see. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can send pictures if folks are interested. You
Yeah.
kind of have to actually kind of get down there to see it. But
Okay.
anyway, as Mark said, these are kind of important. The project 2 one I would say is slightly more important because I do think there's some potential to damage the structure that we had to build. So these are important, and these two won't be the only things, long term as we look to maintain the capacity that we're creating in the river. So this is something we're going to have to keep thinking about as the years go on.
Makes sense. Okay. All right. I think that's it. Thank you all for sticking with us. The consent agenda. I forgot.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
A roll call vote. Mariano,
Yes.
Rich.
So I have to recuse myself from the consent agenda because I'm one of the organizers of one of the events. So
Okay.
since it's all bundled together.
All right. That's fair enough. Mike.
I recuse myself as well. Sorry.
Oh.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
So, all right.
We have to break this up, maybe?
Let's break it up. So, Rich, what are you recusing yourself of?
I don't mind recusing myself from all of it. I mean, I think if there's 3 votes to move the consent agenda,
There's not.
There isn't. There's only 4 of us. So there are only
Rich,
2.
which event are you organizing?
Spirit Night.
Spirit Night. Okay. That's
Spirit Night.
That's item number.
That's number 5.
Number 5. Okay. So I move that we approve the consent agenda except for item 5. Rich, would you second that?
Sorry, I'm just looking at it. Sorry.
Mike, which one is yours?
Yeah, which one is?
I'm recusing anything with the First House Pub.
Okay.
So then we can't approve number 5. Because that has both Spirit Night and First House Pub.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say, Rich. I mean, I think that it's good to be cautious, but unless there's some sort of real benefit you're deriving from it, even though you're involved in the planning process, I mean, you're not putting fees in your pocket from it, right?
No, I'm not.
So I mean, I think you can be comfortable, supporting it. So.
Okay. That's fine.
So Rich, you're okay with supporting 5? So
yeah,
I will try a third motion. I move that we approve the consent agenda as printed on our packet, understanding that Mike will recuse himself. Rich, would you second that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just reading through the consent agenda again.
Okay. That's fair.
Don't worry about reading it, Rich. Just vote the whole thing. It's fine.
That's fine. Yes, I'll second it.
Okay, so a roll call vote. Rich,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
Mike is recused. And I vote yes as well.
I
Thank
move
you for
that-
catching that. Yes. Okay,
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
roll call vote. Rich,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Mariano,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Good work,
Thanks, everyone.
everybody.
Just wanted to
Congratulations.
thank you all again. Looking forward to working with you. Mark and
Yes.
Stacy, you as well.
Yes.
Well, you still have a little bit of time, Beth, so don't screw it up.
Try my best.
Lisa, Patty, everybody, thank you
Thanks.
for